Today's like goal is 100 berries. Smash that like button to get that juicy fruit and hit subscribe for more amazing recaps. Now let's get into it. The city wasn't just damaged, it was annihilated. What was once bustling life and towering buildings is now dust, rubble, and silence. All thanks to the clash between Gongyu and that twisted villain, Huang. Despite his body battered and bruised, Huang's face is twisted in a sick grin, his laugh cutting through the ruin. Our hero, Gongyu, has him pinned to the ground, hands locked around his throat. Yet Huang only sneers, his gaze slipping over his shoulder like he knows something Gongyu doesn't. And then Gongyu's gaze follows. His heart stops. His friends, his comrades who'd stood beside him through every battle are scattered across the ground like broken toys, limbs twisted, bodies motionless. The sight sears into him, and tears flow, unbidden, down his face. His spirit is breaking, but his principles hold strong. No matter the rage, the sorrow, the sheer devastation in his heart, Gongyu won't cross that line. He won't become the monster. Instead, he releases Huang to the law, hoping, praying that justice will be enough for the ones he's lost. But deep inside, a part of him is already cracking, whispering that he'll regret this decision. The news of Huang's capture spreads like wildfire. Headlines scream that the world's worst villain has finally been locked away, stripped of his power with a high-tech suppressor and imprisoned in the deepest cell of Ruculus prison. But for Gongyu, watching the reports, seeing the tributes to his friends, there's no relief, only hollow, aching loss. He's sinking deeper when a hand reaches out and clicks off the screen. He looks up to find his brother, Inspector Gangozio, standing there. Gangozio works at Ruculus, one of the few tasked with keeping monsters like Huang locked away. He gives Gongyu a soft reminder not to let this destroy him. Gongyu, feeling the burn of loss and anger, admits that he wishes he'd just ended it himself. But his brother pulls him back, reminding him of their promise, the hero's code they'd sworn to uphold. They're not killers, they're protectors. Justice isn't about vengeance, no matter how much blood was spilled. They're better than that, and Gongyu has to hold on to that, for his friend's sake. Gongyu fights the doubts twisting inside him, listening as his brother promises that Huang's execution is set for next week, and that he'll be there to oversee it. For now, they join together to honor their fallen comrades, standing amidst roses and tears. Outside, a crowd seethes, demanding Huang's death, a firestorm of anger and grief. Days pass, heavy with dread, and then the day arrives. But instead of the justice Gongyu had clung to, he's met with his worst nightmare. Huang survives, while his brother, his only remaining family, is dead, lost to the chaos. Days later, Gongyu sits alone before his brother's memorial, drowning in guilt and grief. He's barely aware of his surroundings when a voice slices through the fog. He looks up to see the iron-willed warden of Ruculus, Si Yunzhou, flanked by her entourage. She's got something for him, a video tablet with footage of his brother's final encounter with Huang. Without a word, she hits play, and Gongyu watches, his hands clenched into shaking fists. In the video, Huang is being led toward his execution, but he's not going quietly. He sneers at Gangozio, calling his name, mocking him with questions, needling him for every perceived weakness. And then, he twists the knife deeper, talking about the thrill he gets from taking lives, daring Gangozio to admit he feels it too. Finally, Gangozio, pushed to his limit, snaps, whispering, "What do you mean by having fun?" And in that moment, the trap is set. Huang's got him exactly where he wanted, savoring one last, twisted victory over Gongyu's shattered world. The white-haired psycho's grin widens, and he casually mentions how he gets a thrill from the slightest touch of his finger, making heads pop, like fragile bubbles. Gang Ho meets his gaze, unflinching, and says he doesn't share that excitement. In fact, every time he executes someone, guilt eats at him, even though all he does is press a button to carry out justice on scumbags like Huang. He talks about the nightmares that haunt him, faces of the villains he's condemned, their voices taunting him, asking if he's become one of them, haunting his sleep. Huang raises an eyebrow, amused, and asks why Gang Ho even sticks around if it torments him so much. Gang Ho just shrugs, calm. "Someone has to do the job," he replies. "I'm just doing my duty as a correction officer, like anyone else." Not long after, they secure Huang into the execution seat. As he's asked for any final words, He gives a smirk and asks one last time, tauntingly, who's older between him and Gongyu. But Gang Ho remains silent, unfazed, as he begins the countdown. The clock ticks down 3, 2, 1, and just as he presses the button, the video feed cuts off, leaving Gongyu watching, confused, desperate to know what happened. At that moment, Si-Yoon-jo picks up the story, explaining that right as the execution was underway, the entire prison lost power. Officers went into a frenzy, one even asking if it could be Huang's doing. Then, to their horror, they realized the nightmare was real. Huang, somehow, shattered his power suppression device, fried by an EMP pulse, and detonated the chamber, sending everyone into chaos. One guard, mustering his last shred of courage, shouts into his radio, calling for backup. But his voice goes unanswered, and before he can try again, Huang is right behind him. A second later, the guard's face contorts, veins straining, until Huang leans in, whispering, "Pop!" The guard vanishes in a blast, and Gang Ho can only watch in terror as his comrades fall. With a dark smile, Huang strolls over to Gang Ho, guessing he must be the older brother. Despite the horror, Gang Ho stands firm, drawing his dagger and swinging it with a steady hand. But to his shock, his hand dissolves mid-swing, vanishing into thin air. Pain sears through him, and he screams as Huang taunts him, pressing his guess again. Refusing to answer, Gang Ho grabs the dagger with his other hand, lunging once more, even as Huang stands there, cool and detached. In a sudden blast, the officer is no more reduced to nothing, leaving just his hat suspended in midair over a pool of blood. Huang, almost amused, watches the scene unfold, casually speculating if he guessed right about Gang Ho's identity. Back in the present, Gongyu sits, utterly speechless, absorbing the shocking story he's just been told. But Si-Yoon-jo isn't finished. She reveals that the EMP didn't just disable Huang's suppressor, it knocked out every suppression device in the prison. Authorities barely managed to prevent a full-scale breakout, but now countless officers are trapped inside, surrounded by dangerous, unrestrained inmates. When Gongyu asks who triggered the EMP, she admits they still don't know the answer. Despite the weight of the moment, on the very day of his brother's funeral, she requests his help in entering Ruculus to bring an end to the chaos. Gongyu surprises her by agreeing immediately, but he has one condition. Gongyu recalls his friend's code. Heroes save lives. They don't take them. But he also remembers his brother's words that justice belongs to the law and that those who carry it out are called executioners. With both of these principles in mind, Gongyu decides he will enter Ruculus not merely as a hero but as an executioner, bringing justice to those who deserve it. As the prison gates swing open, the chaos inside halts as prisoners catch sight of the figure stepping through. A few reckless inmates charge toward him, but with barely a motion, they're flung aside like insects. In the shadow of the gate, he stands tall, donned in a corrections officer's uniform, the new guardian of Ruculus. The air shifts, and recognition flickers in the prisoners' eyes as they realize who he is. Their curiosity twists quickly into anger, and they surge at him like it's their final chance. Gongyu doesn't budge, ready to face this riot head-on. He balls his fist and with one powerful punch, drops the first inmate cold. Another swing, and more fall around him like toppled statues, leaving limbs scattered across the floor. The remaining prisoners freeze, stunned, finally grasping just how outmatched they are against this force. With the gate closing behind him, Gongyu strides forward, steady and controlled. After a quick mic check, he addresses the crowd of prisoners, who now hang on his every word. Under government order, every floor up to the 5th basement is now under my control. I'm here to fulfill my brother's duty, and judgment will be immediate. And when Gongyu says it, his voice is unwavering, leaving every prisoner certain he means every word. Gongyu is laser-focused, driven to reach the deepest level of Ruculus and finally bring down his brother's killer. It seems the white-haired psycho senses his arrival and is equally eager for a showdown. Meanwhile, the prisoners on the ground floor catch wind of Gongyu's presence and, regaining some bravado, start trash-talking him, daring him to take on everyone there. Gongyu, unfazed, simply reminds them of the lives they've taken, innocent lives lost without remorse. "Why the fuss now?" he challenges, watching as the inmates shift uneasily. The prisoners begin boasting amongst themselves. One smirks, saying he's only taken out 23 people, while others claim lower numbers, defending their rights, as if it somehow lessens their guilt. Amid this noisy crowd stands Gwen Choi, calm and detached, his green hair a distinctive marker. Known as both a dangerous offender and the murderer of 8, Gwen exudes a misplaced confidence, convinced he can slip past Gongyu undetected. He breaks into a sprint, weaving through the mob in a blur of speed, only to meet Gongyu's fist in a single crushing blow. Finally, the rowdy crowd falls silent, now more inclined to listen. Gongyu's voice cuts through, steady and cold. "Here's the deal," he says. "Either you put those suppression devices back on and return to your cells, or you choose to end it here." The chilling finality in his tone sends shivers through the room. Yet, one arrogant inmate scoffs, rallying others, saying they might as well fight since they're already screwed. Why not try their hardest to escape? Gongyu isn't having it. With a dark edge in his voice, he reminds them that he's not here to hand out favors. "Consider this your last mercy," he says, "before I bring you down for good." His words sink in, and the once defiant crew starts to panic, weighing their options, a few already slipping their suppression devices back on, hoping to stall for time. But one inmate, refusing to back down, begins to speak up. With an ominous green glow radiating from him, he screams to grab everyone's attention. Once he has their eyes, he declares they shouldn't fear some random hero from equality, referring to Gongyu's hero association. According to him, if they all band together, Gongyu doesn't stand a chance. He even brags about having taken down a second-tier hero once, claiming they can easily do it again. The crowd, feeling the spark of rebellion, gets riled up, each ready to rush Gongyu for a shot at freedom. Fueling their excitement further, the instigator barks for them not to retreat, spurring the inmates into action. But Gongyu knows this guy all too well. He's heard it all from the warden. Ruculus's threat levels are carefully classified. The ground floor alone houses over 300 hardened criminals, each responsible for multiple lives lost. The first basement holds another 100 convicts, all of whom have endangered entire towns. On the second basement, the stakes rise higher, with over 30 who've terrorized entire cities. Down on the third, 10 prisoners reside, those who made entire nations beg for mercy. And deeper still, on the fourth, there are 5 who pose a threat to entire continents. Gongyu is more than ready to face them all. The 5th basement floor is where the real nightmares are kept, along with Gongyu's arch-nemesis. 2 other criminals sit, each capable of endangering the entire world. The warden reassures him, though, that he might not have to face everyone below. Prisoners on different floors don't exactly get along, and it's not unusual to see them fighting each other to pass the time. In fact, Huang himself is likely having a bit of fun, clearing out those lower floors, giving our hero a twisted head start. But things are different on the ground floor. Here, the prisoners are united under one leader, a notorious criminal named Heilson. With his unique power to shout and enhance the strength of those around him, Heilson is about to stir up some serious trouble. When Gongyu confronts him, he reminds Heilson of the atrocities he's committed, including the attack on a hospital that left 8 dead, among them a second-tier hero named Hayes. Heilson, however, sneers and corrects him, claiming he killed 10, proudly noting that Hayes was pregnant with twins. The look on his face is shameless, disgusting. Gongyu, holding back his rage, radios the warden to ask if Ruculus can handle a bit of roughhousing. Her reply is simple: he's free to go as hard as he needs. With permission granted, Gongyu prepares to bring down the hammer, but Heilson just scoffs, mocking him as a trash hero who only captured Huang after his own team's sacrifice. Then, with a sneer, Heilson vows to send Gongyu straight to where his fallen teammates went. Raising his voice, Heilson screams his empowerment spell, his revolting shout ringing through the air. The prisoners around him feel the surge, wild with newfound strength as they rush at Gongyu in a frenzy. But Gongyu doesn't flinch. He swings his leg, unleashing a crackling wave of dark red energy that tears through the room, wiping out every enemy in its path. When the dust settles, Heilson stands frozen, his face etched with horror as he stares at the remains of his forces, scattered limbs and blood strewn across the floor. Gongyu isn't finished, though. Lifting his leg high, he brings it down hard, sending another shockwave through the room. The floor quakes, and the very walls of Ruculus tremble as the prisoners drop like flies. Elsewhere in the prison, A figure strapped in full criminal gear feels the tremor and smirks. "Gongyu has arrived," he mutters, already anticipating the chaos. Down on the ground floor, it's a day of reckoning for the rioting prisoners, each feeling the wrath of Gongyu's power. As the empowerment spell forces them to charge him again, Gongyu delivers a powerful strike, slicing through them with dark energy. In an instant, they're lifted, cut cleanly in half, suspended mid-air, their bodies split from the waist. The once proud leader, Heilson, stares in disbelief as his own life slips away. Standing among the fallen, Gongyu watches as limbs and bodies drop from above, hitting the ground with final, sickening thuds. Silence descends, broken only by the lifeless remains of those who dared rebel. Yet, there are still two left standing, barely clinging to life, and Gongyu's gaze shifts to them, offering them one final choice. They stand frozen, caught like deer in headlights, unsure of what to do. Finally, the larger one loses his patience and lunges, swinging a fist at Gongyu only to have his head burst like a balloon. That leaves the smaller one, trembling with fear. Surrendering, he decides to take the safer option and put the device back on. Gongyu tosses him the device, and the prisoner, shaking, reaches out. But suddenly, his expression twists into a nasty grin, and he blasts Gongyu with a surge of purple energy. The prisoner laughs maniacally, thinking he's caught Gongyu off guard until his laughter dies as Gongyu stands there, unharmed. Before dealing with the trickster, Gongyu remembers something Tomai from Equality once shared. A villain had boasted that only those who fight up close understand the thrill of crushing an opponent with their bare hands. Fueled by that memory, Gongyu lets the thrill surge, turning the prisoner into dust like he's crushing an egg in his palm. With these pests out of the way, Gongyu continues deeper into the prison. Soon enough, he encounters a familiar face, a twisted criminal he hasn't seen in 3 years. The man's locked in solitary confinement for cannibalism and other vile acts, waiting, it seems, just for Gongyu's arrival. He begins to exchange small talk, but Gongyu cuts straight to the point, telling him to put his suppression device on if he values his life. Instead of complying, the criminal goes into a flashback, proudly recalling the day Equality captured him. That's when Gongyu notices a pot on the floor, packed with what appears to be human flesh. Realization hits, and his expression shifts from shock to horror. The criminal savors the moment, casually explaining how perfectly seasoned human flesh tastes. Anger boils within Gongyu, and he's ready to take the vile man down. But he remembers a moment when Captain Marvel stopped him, reminding him of the hero's code. He'd been forced to swallow his rage and let the criminal walk free. But now, Gongyu's made his intentions clear. If this man doesn't talk, he'll take it as a death wish. The prisoner tries to provoke him, daring Gongyu to ask why he committed such heinous acts. But without a word, Gongyu swings his blade, slicing clean through the man's head. Except it was only an illusion. The man's still standing, alive and laughing. His powers let him engrave his memory into others' minds, ensuring they can't forget him even in death. Unfazed, Gongyu slices the prisoner's hand clean off, remarking that he was aiming for his annoying face and simply missed. Now certain his end is near, the prisoner asks if Gongyu remembers the people he's cut down along the way. Gongyu dismisses him, saying those scumbags aren't worth remembering. In a final, desperate move, the prisoner conjures illusions of Gongyu's fallen companions, each looking innocent and real. But Gongyu sees right through it, slicing through the illusions without hesitation. Shocked, the prisoner watches as Gongyu wipes away his companions' faces without flinching. Coldly, Gongyu states they were only illusions, then slices the prisoner in two, dropping his lifeless form to the ground. Before leaving, Gongyu makes it clear he's no longer the hero he once was. He's taken on the role of executioner. As the man takes his last breaths, he whispers that Gongyu has become something else entirely, not the hero he faced before, but a monster no different than Huang himself. Those parting words strike a nerve with Gongyu, though we don't get to see his full reaction. The scene cuts back to the depths of the prison, where Huang, growing restless, is goading a nearby prisoner, urging her to put up a decent fight. He's clearly tired of waiting for Gongyu and muses about heading up to meet him if no one here proves entertaining. Meanwhile, outside the prison, 3 figures stand on a high hill, watching the chaos unfold from afar. The leader of the trio, a woman clutching an iPad, is completely absorbed in monitoring Gangyu's progress. She seems thrilled by his daring moves, even calling him husband under her breath. Her companions look at each other, bewildered, and ask what she's talking about. Without a beat, she grins, stating that Gangyu is definitely going to be her hubby. The bigger guy beside her, named Canis, raises a brow and reminds her that she'd once been smitten with Huang, even planning to make him her husband. Why the sudden switch? The other woman, Gato, jumps in, adding that the whole point of launching the EMP was to free Huang, so Gangyu should be seen as an enemy, just an obstacle in their way. But Sinka, the leader, shrugs it off, claiming Gangyu's no hero now he's become a butcher. Canis rolls his eyes and suggests she settle on one guy because sailing on two boats isn't exactly ethical. Torn between the two, Sinka finally decides to go with whoever survives, thrilled at the thought of a showdown between her two choices. Back inside the prison, the warden checks in with Gangyu, giving him a nod of approval for handling the ground floor so quickly. She warns him that the inmates only get stronger the deeper he goes and suggests he rest before heading down. Gangyu waves off the idea, requesting she simply open the next door. She agrees but asks a favor first. She's received reports from officers trapped on the second basement level and pleads with him to save them. They have families waiting for them. Staying focused, Gangyu asks for a count of the remaining officers on each floor. She admits she's unsure, as all communication below the first basement has been lost, except for a faint link to the fifth floor. Meanwhile, down in the depths, a lone soldier drags himself along the floor, his legs gone. It's clear that Huang is taking his time, deliberately going through each prisoner, almost as if he's clearing a path for Gangyu to come face him. After taking in the warden's update, Gangyu nods and makes his way to the entrance of the first basement. With her approval, the control room gives the go-ahead, and the door groans open. Before he steps inside, she offers him one last warning, urging him to watch his back since the prisoners here are far from average. As soon as he steps into the first basement, Gangyu understands why. The prisoners unleash a barrage of attacks, laughing and taunting as they hurl every weapon they have. It's a chaotic welcome, but Gangyu's stance is steady, undeterred as he prepares to face them head-on. As Gangyu's relentless assault leaves bodies strewn across the floor, a woman watching from the sidelines is struck with horror, but she doesn't have a moment to process it, as a hulking prisoner closes in on her, gripping her by the throat and hoisting her off the ground. With a smug grin, he taunts her, saying he's been waiting ages to give her the beating of a lifetime. Calling out to his buddies, he shouts that he's finally captured their long-awaited chicken. But his taunt falls on dead ears. Gangyu's already taken them all out, leaving a trail of bodies in his wake. Realizing he's alone, the prisoner's smugness fades, replaced by stunned silence. When he glances up, he sees Gangyu hurtling down, landing a powerful punch that shatters both the prisoner and the ground beneath them. The impact sends shockwaves through the room, even knocking the woman to her knees. Finished with the prisoner, Gangyu turns to her and firmly instructs her to leave when the next door opens. This place, after all, is no haven. His steely gaze sends a chill down her spine, and she stammers a quick reply. As he turns to move forward, she reminds him about Tomoki, a notorious prisoner captured by Hiro Tomai, currently held in isolation on the first basement floor. Gangyu just nods, dismissing her concern as he presses on. Down in the isolation cells, the sounds of chaos echo, stirring the prisoners within. One suggests that maybe a breakout is underway, only for Tomoki to stroll in, mocking their cluelessness. Standing on a fallen guard's body, she scoffs, pointing out that if the prisoners were truly trying to escape, they wouldn't be making such a racket. She throws a jab at her cellmates, mocking their lack of intellect, saying that's exactly why they're here and prison brains are apparently a rare commodity. Her smugness doesn't sit well with a towering, muscle-bound prisoner, who steps forward, glaring at her and asking if she's looking for trouble. Tomoki smirks and, with biting confidence, taunts him, questioning if he even has the guts to lay a finger on her. She sneers, reminding them that while they may have only targeted helpless civilians, she's taken down superpowered foes by the dozens. She's even lost count. The big guy's had enough. He hasn't faced superpowered foes before, but he's sure he's about to now. Before he can blink, though, Tomoki cuts him down with a single swipe of her clawed hand, severing him in two. Calmly, She looks at what remains of him and asks if he's got any more to say about killing. The other prisoners, stunned, stare at her in awe as she lectures them. She recalls her past as a hero, a time when she saved countless civilians and learned firsthand how to combat superpowered enemies. She offers them a proposition: join her, and she'll teach them the art of taking down those with powers, even promising to help them take on Gongyu himself, as she knows every inch of his abilities. Her mention of inside knowledge on Gongyu's powers excites her cellmates, who eagerly ask how she's privy to such information. Smiling, she reminds them of her long tenure as a hero, which exposed her to detailed knowledge about most heroes. One of the prisoners, skeptical, reminds her that she was only a third-tier hero, while Gongyu sits at the top in the League of Equality. How, then, does she expect to defeat him? That's when Tomoki drops a bombshell. She recalls that when Captain Marvel took over Equality, she overhauled the hero system. First, she redefined heroism, banning heroes from killing villains. Then, she made it mandatory for heroes to train together in teams. Lastly, she abolished the tier ranking system that once divided heroes into 5 levels, leveling the playing field entirely. With the tier system removed in the league, there's no official gauge of Gang Yu's strength, leaving some uncertain if he's as powerful as his reputation suggests. Rumors add fuel to the fire, hinting that Gang Yu's connection to the league could have more to do with an alleged romance with Captain Marvel than his heroics. This idea catches on with one thug, who admits he's never seen Gang Yu fight, though he points out that it took him no time at all to clear the ground floor, meaning he must be at least second tier in strength. The woman dismisses his logic, rolling her eyes, saying that those ground floor prisoners were weaklings. She goads the group further, reminding them that they've each claimed thousands of lives, and if the ground floor inmates were any indication, these isolation cell prisoners are leagues above. She points to Speech, who proudly boasts the highest kill count in the room, a staggering total near 6,500 people. She assures them Gang Yu isn't weak, but insists she knows how to exploit his weaknesses. Teaming up to confront him, she suggests, is their best and only option. Speech, dubious, speaks up, asking if she's certain about her plan. She doesn't mince words, reminding him they don't have much choice. Death is coming for them either way, so hesitation isn't an option. With this grim reminder, the goons raise their hands, committing to the plan. Speech hesitates for a moment but ultimately agrees, setting his sights on Gang Yu. As they strategize, let's take a moment to understand these powers in their world. Superpowers, or abilities, come in 3 categories: physical, which enhance or transform the user's body; creation, which allows one to generate materials or objects from thin air; and special, a broad category covering all unique abilities that don't fall into the other 2. Back in the cell, a hush falls over the thugs as Gang Yu appears at the entrance, standing before them with an imposing presence. Speech uses a physical type power known as brainwave communication to link their minds, allowing them to strategize telepathically. As they connect, the woman mentions that Gang Yu's abilities are physical type, just like her own, which makes her confident that she's familiar with his limitations. Gang Yu steps into the room, addressing the group with a simple ultimatum: put on their suppression devices or face death. He gets no reply, only a surprise attack that barely affects him. The woman expected this, knowing that Gang Yu rarely dodges attacks. She's stationed prisoners with creation and special type abilities behind a fortified door, ready to launch an assault from a distance. A rainbow of powers explodes through the room as every thug hurls their abilities at him. Speech watches in amazement as Gang Yu doesn't flinch or attempt to block, just as the woman predicted. She explains why. Gang Yu doesn't see their attacks as threats and doesn't feel the need to dodge, but she has a twist in mind. Hidden in the shadows, several prisoners take advantage of Gang Yu's calm stance, placing power suppression devices all over him from head to toe. Speech, having followed her instructions, had gathered these devices from the guards' bodies. He's skeptical of their effectiveness, though, noting that these devices were meant to restrain only the lower-level prisoners. The woman reassures him, saying that stacking 10 devices should easily hold a second-tier hero, and they've strapped 20 onto Gang Yu for good measure. Thinking they've won, the thugs begin to celebrate, but their joy is short-lived. Gang Yu, unbothered, peels off the devices like they're nothing more than pesky stickers, throwing them to the ground. The woman's face twists in shock as Gang Yu rips through the devices effortlessly, proving he's leagues above even a first-tier hero. Sensing the tables turning, she quickly commands the group to move to their backup plan, telling him to halt, claiming they've taken guards hostage. Before her threat even lands, Gang Yu's dark red energy crackles with a flick of his finger, leaving the guards unharmed but reducing the thugs to piles of blood and flesh. This brutal display reveals a second flaw in her plan, assuming Gang Yu's abilities were only physical. As she and her remaining allies cower in horror, the few thugs left question if they should surrender. One by one, the prisoners hiding behind fortified doors hesitantly offer to put on their suppression devices. But Gang Yu's cold expression doesn't soften. His crackling energy surges again, sweeping through the room and finishing off everyone still hiding. This devastating final attack marks the third oversight in the woman's plan, underestimating the gap between her group's abilities and Gang Yu's strength. Now certain he's in serious trouble, Speech turns to the woman, shouting in frustration, asking what went wrong and if she has a backup plan to salvage the mess she's led them into. Thanks for watching, guys. Comment Flamingo and subscribe for the next part. Today's goal is 100 berries. Smash that like button to get that juicy fruit and hit subscribe for more amazing recaps. Now let's get into it. While the guy behind her keeps yelling, blaming her for dragging them all into this mess, she's too frustrated to figure out a plan. She snaps, telling him to shut up before, in a fit of rage, she drives her clawed hand right through his stomach, leaving him doubled over, blood pouring from his mouth as he collapses to the ground. With him silenced, she turns her focus back to the problem at hand, her mind racing, struggling to understand how Gang Yu could shrug off so many suppression devices. If he were truly this powerful, he'd kept it well hidden until now. Her gaze lands on a wounded soldier nearby, who, sensing his end, begins to cry, pleading for anyone to save him. Almost as if on cue, his wish is granted. Gang Yu steps forward and, with one swift move, severs the woman's clawed hand, rescuing the soldier from her grasp. Without hesitation, he turns to her, giving her a chance for any last words. At that moment, realization dawns on her. She knows she's finished. But instead of fear, with a wicked smirk, she mentions Tomai, the very hero who captured her and put her in this prison. Reflecting on her past, she confesses she once told Tomai not to become a hero, advice her younger sister foolishly ignored. Wait, Tomai is her biological sister? This revelation catches Gang Yu off guard, and it's a twist as surprising to him as it is to us. But she's not finished. She mocks Gang Yu, remarking on the irony of a supposed hero taking so many lives, violating the hero code against killing. Gang Yu's patience wears thin, and he finally cuts her off, asking if she has anything meaningful to add, as if ready to silence her chatter once and for all. But before we close the chapter on her story, let's take a look at her backstory. When Tomoki first joined the hero organization, something felt off. She observed how heroes could act with impunity, even if innocent civilians were caught in the crossfire. There was no accountability, no consequences. One incident in particular stayed with her: a hero who took down a criminal but also ended the life of an innocent bystander, all without a hint of remorse. With her twisted sense of justice, Tomoki took on the hero name Bliss and joined the League. Her younger sister, Tomai, admired her, seeing her as a protector and a role model. She looked up to Tomoki's strength and heroism, but there was more beneath Tomoki's actions than met the eye. She wasn't saving lives out of compassion. Instead, she reveled in the power it gave her, feeding a sense of superiority. Then one day, Tomoki crossed an irreversible line. She killed her first target, and the rush was intoxicating. From that moment, she spiraled, taking down anyone who opposed her: villains, civilians, even fellow heroes. She thrived on the fear and disbelief in her victims' eyes, feeling unbeatable, a predator in a world of prey. But as her behavior became increasingly unhinged, Tomai couldn't ignore the signs. Tomoki would come home late, covered in blood, her eyes distant. Driven by concern and curiosity, Tomai decided to follow her sister one night, witnessing firsthand the depths of her brutality. Confronted by her younger sister, Tomoki didn't deny her actions. Instead, she invited Tomai to join her, to experience the thrill of the hunt. It was in that horrific moment that Tomai's powers awakened, and her first act as a hero was to try to stop Tomoki's rampage. After registering as a heroine, Tomai dedicated herself to tracking down her now villainous sister. Their tragic saga reached a climax when Tomai finally caught up to Tomoki, arresting the person she once idolized, bringing an end to her sister's brutal reign. Even after her capture, Tomoki showed no remorse. Instead, she sneered at Tomai's summoning powers, mocking her for relying on distance attacks, saying she'd never know the true thrill of crushing someone with her own hands. And so, Tomoki found herself behind bars, harboring nothing but resentment for the sister she once protected. Now, faced with the reality of her own end, Tomoki asks Gangyu if her sister died peacefully. Gangyu, undeterred, reveals the truth that Tomai died in battle against Huang, obliterated in the struggle. Her last words were desperate, a plea for her older sister to come to her rescue, just like in the old days. Hearing this, a flicker of regret crosses Tomoki's face. But before she can fully process the news, she begins to transform, her body contorting, shifting into something grotesque, neither human nor beast. It's clear she's preparing for one final confrontation with Gangyu. In a flash, she lunges at Gangyu, but just as she swings, he vanishes, leaving only a trace of crackling dark red energy in the air. Before she can fully register what happened, he reappears behind her, delivering a brutal kick that sends her tumbling backward like a toppled bowling pin. She crashes hard, but as the dust settles, she charges at him again, only to receive another direct hit to the gut, knocking the wind out of her and leaving her coughing up blood. Just like that, she reverts to her human form, collapsing to her knees, weakened and vulnerable. While she groans in pain, Gangyu feels a twinge of pity, conflicted about getting his hands dirty with a family member of his fallen companion. The woman, swallowing her pride, begins to beg, pleading for her life and reminding him that, as a hero, he swore never to kill anyone. But Gangyu's face remains cold as he calmly tells her he's no hero anymore. Desperate, she clings to his feet, offering anything if only he'll spare her. Her pleas fall on deaf ears, and Gangyu reminds her of the innocent lives she's taken, people who once begged for their own lives just like she's doing now. He asks if she even remembers their faces, if she can recall their pleas for mercy before she mercilessly ended them. Realizing there's no escape, she braces herself, watching as he charges his fist for a final blow, preparing to deliver the end she can't avoid. The sounds of their battle reverberate through the prison, sending shockwaves that even the goons outside can hear. Those echoing booms excite the crazed woman waiting in anticipation, convinced it's her future husband causing the ruckus inside. Meanwhile, the officers trapped within the prison shiver in fear, while another prisoner, eagerly listening, grows more anxious to meet Gangyu. Barely containing his excitement, he decides it's time to head up to meet him. But before he can move, a powerful blast knocks him backward, sending him crashing to the ground. Stunned, he looks up to see his attacker figure, who's not only unafraid of him but more than ready to give this little villain a run for his money. The attacker, adjusting his hat, compliments the older man on his sinister appearance. The elderly villain responds with a wicked grin, chuckling that he's just an old guy having a bit of fun. This is Kingstone, the infamous prisoner from the 5th basement floor, and Ruculus Prison's #1 inmate. Back in the control room, 2 junior officers catch something unexpected on the monitors. Nervously, they point it out to the warden, alerting her that Kingstone and Huang have crossed paths on basement level 5. Surprisingly, the warden merely shrugs, explaining that this is actually good news. Her calm reaction throws the juniors off, so she clarifies if Kingstone and Huang clash, one of them will be taken out, and she's personally rooting for Kingstone. After all, in her eyes, he's less of a threat compared to Huang. The footage on the monitor grabs her attention further as she notices Kingstone lifting a girl into the air like a puppet, and she can't help but wonder what he's planning. Meanwhile, back in the depths of basement 5, Huang questions the old man, asking if he's really up for a fight. Kingstone, clearly eager for a bit of action, grins and makes it clear he's looking forward to a little match. Huang, however, isn't as keen, muttering that he's not exactly interested in a showdown. But Kingstone isn't one to take no for an answer. His expression grows dark, and with a menacing tone, he says he'd like to have a little fun with Huang, leaving no room for refusal. Before we jump into the battle, let's delve into Kingstone's past. Known as the #1 prisoner of Ruculus, he's been confined to the 5th basement floor for as long as anyone can remember. Unlike the other inmates, many of whom have body counts in the millions, Kingstone's list of victims is surprisingly short. He's only killed 3 people, but each of his targets was monumental. His first victim was Carix, the world's most feared villain of his time. After that, he took down the legendary superhero duo Clark and Hilo, who were widely regarded as the strongest heroes of their generation. Kingston had emerged from the shadows years ago, effortlessly taking down 3 of the most powerful figures in the world. After finishing them off, he turned to the soldiers who'd witnessed the carnage, casually asking if this made him the strongest person alive, considering he'd just defeated those believed to be invincible. Then, without a hint of resistance, he'd let the government apprehend him. With Kingston's surrender, the world's biggest threat was supposedly neutralized, but the process of his execution got mired in a web of political maneuvering between the government and the Superhero Association, leaving him on death row for over 30 years. In the present, Kingston reassures Huang, telling him he's not all that interested in killing young talents, especially those with potential to grow. Huang, reluctant but intrigued, agrees to a little scuffle. In a blink, he levitates the nearby fallen soldiers, morphing their bodies into grotesque spheres of flesh. With a flick, he launches the meaty projectiles at Kingston, who effortlessly bats each one back, his hands moving at blinding speed. Huang retaliates, hurling them right back, creating a splattered mess on the walls behind them. Blood splatters the walls, and while Huang seems unfazed, Kingston's face lights up, thoroughly enjoying the exchange. Kingston initially thinks Huang might be using telekinesis, but the way he counters suggests otherwise. As Kingston gets into the rhythm, Huang shrugs, clearly unimpressed. He coldly remarks that there's no excitement in fighting Kingston, hinting that the old man will probably keel over from age before anything exciting happens. Kingston, visibly irked by Huang's words, suddenly floats closer, his stance growing more menacing. With each step, the ground cracks and crumbles beneath him as he begins dishing out a verbal lashing, mocking Huang's arrogance. And up in the control room, the warden and officers stumble, barely keeping their footing. But the warden, ever composed, scolds her team for overreacting, reminding them that Rucula's prison was built to withstand attacks from the world's strongest heroes, fortified with 20 layers of reinforced walls. Still, inside the prison, Kingston is in full stride, his power intensifying as he gears up to teach Huang a lesson he won't forget. With a mighty leap, Kingston launches himself at Huang, descending like a meteor with a devastating kick that obliterates everything in its path. The prison shakes even harder, the impact echoing through the corridors. Back in the control room, one officer cautiously informs the warden that Kingston's attack hasn't just unsettled the structure, it's shattered all 20 layers of the supposedly indestructible walls. Hearing this, the warden's face goes pale as she processes the catastrophic damage. Meanwhile, Huang, somewhat impressed, realizes that the old man isn't just talk, and he contemplates following Kingston through the now broken barriers to freedom. But just as Huang considers his next move, a familiar voice interrupts him. It's the crazed woman, Sinka, who had been obsessing over Gang Yu. The officers in the command room watch in shock as events take an unexpected turn. Huang, equally bewildered, demands to know who these newcomers are, only for Sinka, the crazed woman who's been obsessing over Gang, to suggest they could get to know each other better if they just talk. It seems like a twisted date inside a high-security prison, much to the warden's frustration. She's baffled by how Sinka managed to reach the 5th basement, a restricted level. Sinka, sensing the eyes on her, casually flicks her fingers, shutting down every surveillance device trained on them, leaving the warden gritting her teeth in annoyance. Meanwhile, we cut back to Gang Yu, who reports to the warden that he's cleared the 1st basement floor and is now heading down to the 2nd. Just as he's about to proceed, the warden urgently orders him to stop. But before she can explain, the transmission cuts out. Assuming the signal's simply bad down here, Gang Yu moves forward, determined to press on. Opening the heavy door, he begins his descent to the 2nd basement floor. Unlike the gruesome scenes he encountered above, this floor is eerily too clean. There are no bodies, no bloodstains, nothing but an unsettling silence. Suddenly, a piercing scream echoes through the hall. Gang Yu turns to see an officer, running for her life from a pack of rabid hounds. When they lock eyes, the woman mistakes Gang Yu for his brother, Gango. Just as the monstrous hounds are about to attack, Gang Yu obliterates them, leaving the woman momentarily speechless. As Gang Yu asks if she's all right, the woman throws her arms around him, tears streaming down her face, still believing him to be Gango. She expresses her surprise at seeing him here, even more so to discover that he has superpowers, something she never saw Gango use. However, Gangyu gently corrects her, explaining that he isn't Gango but Gangyu, his brother. Realizing her mistake, the woman's face shifts to one of confusion. Recognizing him as a hero from the Hero Association, she questions why he's here, dressed in an officer's uniform. Gangyu brushes past the pleasantries, reminding her that this floor is far from safe, urging her to leave immediately. But what she says next takes him by surprise. She addresses him as brother-in-law. She introduces herself as Jayam, his sister-in-law, leaving Gangyu momentarily stunned. The scene shifts to the second basement's isolation cell, where two shadowy figures hover, surrounded by floating prisoners. One of them, a woman with a dark, priest-like aura, mutters that someone has killed her hounds. This priestess goes by the name of Mal, while her brother, the boy with blue eyes beside her, reassures her that he'll avenge her by sending this intruder straight to hell. Back with Gangyu, he's still reeling from the brother-in-law revelation. He takes a moment to process it, finally acknowledging that he knew Gango had found someone special but hadn't realized they were married. There's an unspoken tension in Jayam's face, and after a pause, she hints at something more, directing his attention to her belly. Gangyu's heart skips a beat as she explains that she's expecting Gangyu's future niece or nephew. Shocked, Gangyu asks more questions, and Jayam explains that it's only been a month, so they don't know the gender yet. Gango had planned to share the news with him after Huang's execution, hoping for a happier reunion. The weight of this news softens Gangyu's expression, though Jayam senses a sadness behind his smile. Concerned, she asks if something is bothering him. Gangyu quickly shakes his head, insisting he's fine, but the pain is still visible in his eyes. Curious about his appearance, she asks why he's wearing an officer's uniform when, as a hero, he wouldn't need to follow the dress code. Gangyu explains that he's no longer just a hero. He's taken on the role of a special corrections officer, tasked with executing prisoners within Ruculus. Jayam, shocked, asks if the warden is forcing him into this job, but Gangyu reassures her, choosing this path himself after recent events. He goes on to fill her in about the EMP strike during Huang's execution. The mention of the EMP leaves Jayam speechless, struggling to comprehend the implications. She asks if there's any idea who was responsible, but Gangyu simply replies that they're still investigating, the culprit shrouded in mystery. Jiahong starts to panic, thinking about her husband, who was supposed to be on the 5th basement floor for the execution when the EMP struck. Gangyu hesitates, choosing not to reveal the truth. Instead, he reassures her, saying Gango has been sending rescue signals from the 5th basement floor. Relieved, she breathes a sigh of relief, not realizing the actual situation. Gangyu then urges her to leave the area, reminding her it's too dangerous. But Jiahong insists on staying, saying he's going to need her down there. Curious about her confidence, Gangyu questions her. She reveals she has a special ability called psychometry, allowing her to read memories just by looking at someone. Gangyu, now anxious about the lie he just told, is visibly nervous, but she reassures him, explaining she doesn't access memories without a valid reason. She mostly uses it to determine guilt or innocence in her role as an officer. Still doubtful, Gangyu asks how her ability will help in this specific situation. That's when she drops a key detail. The entire 2nd basement floor is under the control of 2 siblings, Meal and Male, who have both summoning abilities and special powers. They can summon creatures that pierce hearts, turning their victims into puppets. Every prisoner on the 2nd floor has been transformed into one of their puppets. Gangyu surprises her by saying he already knows their powers, as they trained under Mago, a hero. Politely, he tries to direct her to safety, as he doesn't need further intel. But Jiahong piques his interest when she mentions that some of the puppets are actually officers, and her ability to read memories is the only way to distinguish them from other prisoners. Gangyu argues that if anyone's been turned into a puppet, they're as good as dead, making memory reading pointless. But Jiahong insists that once freed from the siblings' control, the officers could return to normal. Gangyu challenges her plan, doubting the siblings would willingly release anyone. Undeterred, Jiahong suggests she could persuade them, confident she has a way with words. Despite her determination, Gangyu can't ignore the risk, especially with her pregnancy. Jiahong acknowledges the danger but says she can't abandon her duty as an officer, her commitment bringing a slight smile to Gang Yu's face. Still worried, Gang Yu decides on extra precautions. He raises his hand, conjuring a red energy barrier to shield Jiahong from harm. She nervously eyes the barrier, asking if it's safe and not about to slice her up. As he escorts her through the corridor within the barrier, they encounter a new threat. Ahead, they see creatures under Meal's control. Before Jiahong can give too much information, Gang Yu cuts to the chase, asking her to identify the officers among them. She immediately dives into their memories, pinpointing 2 soldiers at the back of the group. Having the intel he needed, Gang Yu quickly wraps Jiahong in the barrier to block her view, clearly not wanting her to see what he's about to do. With a plan in mind, Gang Yu extends his dark energy tendrils, isolating the 2 officers and securing them separately from the other prisoners. Then, he sets to work on the monsters, dismantling them with his bare fists, showing no mercy. Each hit is precise and powerful, leaving nothing but shattered remains in his wake. In one final move, he slices through the remaining monsters in an instant. Watching from a distance, Meal and Male grow uneasy. Meal wonders aloud if Gang Yu might actually be stronger than their mentor, possibly even more powerful than Captain Marvel. Male, visibly scared, clings to her brother, but Meal remains calm, assuring her that even if Gang Yu is formidable, defeating them won't be easy. They still have a small army of prisoners and officers turned puppets on their side. Once Gang Yu finishes off the monsters, he releases Jiahong from the barrier, letting light and air back in. Dazed and annoyed, she questions him, demanding to know why she was cut off from the action. Gang Yu apologizes, but when she presses for details, he simply says he isolated the officers and executed the prisoners. His cold demeanor unsettles her, as she realizes he started to justify these acts as executions. Shocked, Jiahong asks how he managed to pull this off, especially since the execution devices are on the 5th basement floor. Casually, Gang Yu replies that he handled it personally. Her shock intensifies, and she demands to know who authorized this. Gang Yu explains he's acting independently, with the warden's approval. Disappointed and disturbed, Jiahong sighs, questioning the warden's judgment in assigning such tasks to Gang Yu. She's unsettled by his matter-of-fact attitude toward the executions. Gang Yu, unfazed, explains that he's simply fulfilling his duty as a correction officer, seeing nothing wrong with his actions. Jiahong attempts to remind him that officers are supposed to rehabilitate, not destroy, but Gang Yu dismisses her. He admits he once believed in the ideals of not killing, of letting justice take its course, but he now sees the harsh reality. Clinging to such beliefs only leads to unnecessary deaths at the hands of ruthless criminals. Trying to reason with them, he says, is as pointless as teaching a cow to do backflips. With a hardened resolve, Gang Yu declares that he no longer cares if he's a hero or an officer. His only goal is to subdue these monsters and restore order. His dark transformation chills Jiahong to the core, and she reminds him that those he's killed were still human. Annoyed by her sympathy, Gang Yu counters, asking what makes her think these monsters are truly human. In his eyes, every criminal on each floor has committed atrocities that they now must answer for. Gang Yu reminds Jiahong of the old debate around abolishing the death penalty to prevent wrongful convictions, but he points out that ever since psychometric users emerged, wrongful convictions have become a thing of the past. She, as a psychometric herself, knows this well. However, Jiahong continues to argue that individuals shouldn't be acting as executioners. Frustrated, Gang Yu shuts her down, bluntly telling her to stop spouting the same nonsense. He warns her that if she keeps it up, he'll send her topside while he handles things his way, no matter who gets caught in the crossfire. Startled, Jiahong falls silent and follows him further into the prison. When they encounter more creatures, Gang Yu prompts Jiahong to identify the officers among the prisoners. She quickly locates 3 officers at the back. Just as Gang Yu prepares to take down the creatures, she drops a bombshell, saying Gango would be devastated to see his brother as a stone-cold killer. This line hits Gang Yu hard, leaving him momentarily frozen. A creature takes a swing, but its weapon shatters against him, snapping him back. Then, something inside him snaps, unleashing a relentless barrage on the monsters. Fueled by frustration, Gang Yu tears through the prisoners turned monsters, leaving behind nothing but blood and broken bodies. Once he finishes, he pauses, standing in a downpour of blood. Meanwhile, Sinka, still watching, is getting more and more enthralled, convinced Gang Yu is her dream husband. After the carnage, he and Jiahong continue onward, with her shocked to see the floor wiped clean, save for the 3 officers. Gang Yu notices something, and when he turns, he spots familiar faces, the 2 siblings, Meal and Male, who control this floor. He's relieved they've finally appeared, saving him the trouble of hunting them down. Jiahong, however, clearly has a history with these siblings, but they're not exactly welcoming her back. They mock her, saying they would have sent her packing to heaven for the kindness she once showed them if they'd had the chance. Before Gang Yu can engage, Jiahong tries to reason with them, urging them to release the prisoners under their control. In exchange, Gang Yu promises them a quick, painless death. Clinging to each other in fear, the siblings ask if there's any way they can avoid being killed. Gang Yu bluntly states that if they hadn't already claimed thousands of lives, he might have given them a break and simply ordered them to put on suppression devices. But with blood on their hands, mercy isn't on the table. Male, the sister, accuses Gang Yu of being the worst of them all, a monster who won't see heaven. Gang Yu, fists clenched, is ready to send them to the underworld. The brother attempts to negotiate, offering to release their control over the prisoners if Gang Yu lets them go. Unsurprisingly, Gang Yu shuts him down immediately. Jiahong steps in, advising the siblings to comply and put on their suppression devices. Defensively, Meal argues they haven't done anything wrong, refusing to comply. Jiahong hesitates, seeming to sympathize slightly, but Gang Yu, unwavering, tells her that trying to reason with them is futile. He insists she leave it to him from here. The brother tries once more, suggesting that if Gang Yu hears their story, he might change his mind. But Gang Yu dismisses him, uninterested in hearing any excuses. Before the fight begins, he creates a barrier around Jiahong to block her view, preventing her from witnessing what's about to happen. With the siblings isolated, he ensnares them in his red energy, lifting them off the ground and squeezing them until they start to writhe in pain. Recalling an old lesson on torture from a past villain, Gang Yu applies the knowledge, ignoring the siblings' taunts as they call him the true monster. With one final surge, he obliterates them, erasing their presence from the floor. When more creatures rush at him, he methodically cuts them down, sending their dismembered heads spinning through the air. Being called a monster clearly irritates Gang Yu, but he presses on, unfazed by the taunts. In another part of the prison, Sinka watches his face with terror through her crystal ball, her confidence wavering. It appears the siblings have been working together, with one attempting to breach the walls while the other buys time. The sister, desperate to buy more time for her brother, begins chanting, summoning another wave of monstrous creatures. But Gang Yu doesn't hesitate since they're not human. He's quick to tear through them, blasting every last one without a second thought. No matter how many monsters appear, he demolishes them all with one powerful strike after another. As the sister struggles to keep Gang Yu occupied, she anxiously asks her brother how much longer he needs. He replies he needs another 10 minutes to breach the wall. With little choice left, she bites her thumb, activating another spell. But just as she finishes, something crashes through the ceiling. Amidst the dust, Gang Yu steps into view, and upon seeing him, the sister's composure crumbles. Tears streaming down her face, Gang Yu tells her he came directly to her because battling those creatures was a waste of time. He warns them both that this is their final chance to release the officers under their control in exchange for a quick, painless end. The siblings are stunned that he made it through so effortlessly. Despite their fear, they still refuse his order. Unfazed, Gang Yu conjures summoning circles, and with a clap of his hands, divine-looking creatures appear. Each looks formidable in its own right, but before they can even act, Gang Yu slices through them with a single strike, reducing them to nothing. Realizing they're cornered, the siblings resort to drastic measures, hoisting the captive officers and threatening to kill them if Gang Yu comes any closer. But their plan backfires when Gang Yu grabs the sister, threatening her life instead. He puts her through agonizing pain, her screams filling the room as her brother watches, helpless and horrified. Unable to bear it, the brother finally surrenders, agreeing to release the officers. Just as they comply, the brother requests a chance to speak with Jiahong before they meet their fate. But Gang Yu, true to his word, continues inflicting pain on the sister until the brother fully relents. In the next moment, the officers and prisoners return to their senses, free from the siblings' control. Without hesitation, Gang Yu starts taking down the prisoners one by one, leaving the siblings in utter terror. As the bodies pile up, it becomes clear that the siblings might not have been acting out of sheer malice but perhaps desperation. Still, with the area cleared of threats, Gang Yu turns his attention to the officers, instructing them to head upstairs immediately. As they scramble to leave, he turns back to the siblings. Because they honored their side of the deal, he agrees to let them speak with Jia Hong, but insists they move to a safer place, out of sight from the pregnant officer. Once out of the gruesome scene, Jia Hong joins them, bewildered. Gang Yu informs her that the officers are safe from the siblings' mind control, and both siblings wish to speak with her before their execution. Jia Hong suggests slapping suppression devices on them instead, but Gang Yu shuts her down, firmly reminding her that he doesn't like repeating himself. He explains again that everyone on the lower basement floors has taken countless lives, and they won't be left unpunished. The siblings, desperate, plead their case to Jia, claiming they don't deserve the death penalty. Jia is given a moment to speak on their behalf but falters, unable to find words in their defense. With no objection from her, Gang Yu prepares to carry out their sentence. The sisters' pleas grow frantic, her tears unrelenting, but Gang Yu doesn't waver. He raises his fist and brings it down, unleashing a powerful blow that fills the air with dust. As the dust settles, he finds the siblings protected by a barrier, seemingly cast by Mago, a hero from equality. This unexpected twist leaves Gang Yu certain that the siblings couldn't have summoned such a strong shield themselves. It had to be Mago. Gang Yu doesn't hesitate, forming a dark energy sphere in his hand and smashing it against the barrier, only to find yet another shield standing in his way. Gang Yu feels his patience wearing thin with Mago's relentless barriers. Each one shatters under his fists, but it seems no matter how hard he tries, he can't quite reach the siblings. Just as he's about to break through the final barrier, we're pulled into a flashback. In the past, the heroes are enjoying a rare day off, Mago playing happily with his children amidst laughter and smiles. He gathers everyone around, inviting them to join in, but Gang Yu sits alone under a tree, lost in thought. Mago notices and walks over, asking if he's not a fan of kids. Gang Yu admits he doesn't dislike children. He just doesn't know how to connect with them. Mago suggests he try to recall what his own parents did with him as a child. Gang Yu's face darkens as he reveals that his parents died when he was very young and that his older brother was the only family he knew. Mago immediately apologizes, realizing he hit a sensitive spot. After an awkward pause, he lightens the mood with a half-joke, saying he could act as Gang Yu's parent if he ever needed someone to talk to. Gang Yu gives him a skeptical look, and Mago chuckles, assuring him it's partly in jest. He says, however, that Gang Yu can come to him whenever things get tough. The scene shifts to a darker memory. The day Huang's rampage left devastation in its wake. Gang Yu's soul broke as he saw his fallen friends scattered around him. In his final moments, Mago tried to reassure him, telling him everything would be all right. The memory fades, and Gang Yu snaps back to the present, facing the last barrier. For a moment, he hesitates just before breaking through, glancing at the image of Mago above him. He releases Jia from the protective barrier and asks if she can read memories from illusions. She replies hesitantly, saying she can, and he points at the image of Mago, asking her to read the memory of when he cast this spell on the siblings. Moments later, Jia projects Mago's memory in her hand, showing a tender scene where Mago embraces the siblings, holding them close. Gang Yu watches with a cold expression, dismissing it as an unpleasant memory, while Jia sees it as endearing. Curious why Mago would protect them, Gang Yu wonders aloud, still resolute that he'll execute them for their crimes, regardless of what hardships shape them into killers. Jia explains that memories like these reflect moments from Mago's past, offering glimpses into what made him connect with the siblings. As she releases the memory, we drift further back into another flashback, a grim scene in an underground auction house. At the heart of this illegal marketplace, rare ability users are displayed in cages like trophies. Among them, the siblings, barely 6 years old, huddle together as the crowd gawks at them. It's an event known as the Ability User Auction, catering to VIPs who treat people with special abilities as collectibles. It turns out Meal and Mail were sold to the auction house by their own father. Summoners, a rare breed in that world, were always in demand, and the siblings hid their powers to avoid being sold. But when the auction house grew impatient, they prepared to dispose of them until an enthusiastic buyer appeared. This mysterious woman showed interest in their unique abilities, particularly their potential to summon both angels and demons. When asked why she wanted them, the woman's twisted smile revealed her sick fascination. She wanted to see what would happen if an angel mated with a demon. Too young to grasp her intentions fully, the siblings looked up at her with innocent confusion. She just smiled back, assuring them they'd understand soon enough. The entire facility trembles as a colossal explosion tears through the ceiling, creating a gaping hole that rains debris and dust. Nearby structures crumble under the shockwave, leaving everyone within the underground auction house sealed off by a familiar green barrier. Above, we spot the legendary Mago and his apprentice Lupus Allen, a summoning-type ability user. It turns out Mago is here to train Lupus in controlling her summoning powers. Amid their sparring, their attention shifts to two young siblings below, who reveal themselves as summoners and plead to join Mago's tutelage. Intrigued, Mago considers taking them on, despite Lupus's reservations. Testing their abilities, Mago asks the siblings to summon something. Without hesitation, they conjure angels and demons, an impressive feat for such young summoners, as most children can only summon simpler objects. Recognizing their potential, Mago extends his mentorship to them, sparking a journey that would shape their lives over the next 3 years. Under Mago's guidance, the siblings learn the true potential of their powers. For summoners, imagination fuels creation, allowing them to bring forth anything they envision. Meal, with memories of a protective mother, naturally summons angels, while her brother, shaped by their father's cruelty, conjures demons. Mago encourages them to expand their imaginations, predicting that their unique perspectives could produce extraordinary results. The siblings dream of a world where good people ascend to heaven and the wicked are sent to hell, a vision inspired by their mother's simple wisdom. The entire facility trembles as a colossal explosion tears through the ceiling, creating a gaping hole that rains debris and dust. Nearby structures crumble under the shockwave, leaving everyone within the underground auction house sealed off by a familiar green barrier. Above, we spot the legendary Mago and his apprentice Lupus Allen, a summoning-type ability user. It turns out Mago is here to train Lupus in controlling her summoning powers. Amid their sparring, their attention shifts to two young siblings below, who reveal themselves as summoners and plead to join Mago's tutelage. Intrigued, Mago considers taking them on, despite Lupus's reservations. Testing their abilities, Mago asks the siblings to summon something. Without hesitation, they conjure angels and demons, an impressive feat for such young summoners, as most children can only summon simpler objects. Recognizing their potential, Mago extends his mentorship to them, sparking a journey that would shape their lives over the next 3 years. Under Mago's guidance, the siblings learn the true potential of their powers. For summoners, imagination fuels creation, allowing them to bring forth anything they envision. Meal, with memories of a protective mother, naturally summons angels, while her brother, shaped by their father's cruelty, conjures demons. Mago encourages them to expand their imaginations, predicting that their unique perspectives could produce extraordinary results. The siblings dream of a world where good people ascend to heaven and the wicked are sent to hell, a vision inspired by their mother's simple wisdom. One day, Mago receives an urgent call from the Hero Association, reluctantly agreeing to help despite past grievances. The situation is grave, as an ominous figure rumored to be a powerful villain has been spotted in Finland. Mago realizes the severity of the threat and, with a heavy heart, prepares to leave his protégés. When he tells the siblings, they cling to him, begging him to stay. He reassures them, saying he'll be back eventually, but warns them that following him would be deadly. As a final gift, Mago enchants them with a protective symbol, telling them that those who see it will care for them. With a parting wish for them to grow up kind-hearted, he leaves, and the siblings retreat to a remote place, determined to become heroes worthy of Mago's legacy. For 2 years, they practice, studying right and wrong and emerging with a steadfast sense of justice. Upon returning to their hometown, they create a self-proclaimed utopia, enforcing a strict moral code inspired by their mother's teachings. In a bizarre twist, simple, childlike rules such as politeness and honesty become the basis for a brutal judgment system. They watch over the townsfolk with angelic and demonic squads, punishing those who fall short. With each act, they believe they're sending souls to heaven for purification. News of their twisted utopia eventually reaches the Hero Association, prompting Chairman Uteridai to take notice. However, only 3 rookie heroes respond to the call, eager for a chance to climb the ranks but skeptical about taking on mere children. One of them questions why this B1 mission is even on their radar, scoffing at the idea that 2 young kids pose any real threat. The chairman surprises them by revealing that these 2 are none other than Mago's apprentices. Seeing her unhinged behavior, the siblings are horrified but determined. The sister clutches her brother's hand, her face pale with fear. They warn Kyuthu to leave, telling her that they don't want to fight. But this doesn't faze Kyuthu in the slightest. She grins, spinning a blade between her fingers, and taunts them, saying she's only here to see just how powerful they really are and to prove she's still the superior apprentice of Mago. The siblings glance at each other, unsure of how to handle the situation. The sister, Meal, steps forward and calls forth her angelic summons, creating a circle of protective light around her and her brother. Kyuthu's grin only widens as she watches, clearly relishing the challenge. She begins summoning an arsenal of blades and sharp objects, spinning them around herself like a deadly storm, before sending them flying toward the siblings with a flick of her wrist. Meal's angelic guardians shield her and her brother, deflecting the sharp projectiles with radiant barriers. But Kyuthu's attacks don't relent, and soon the air is thick with glinting metal and streaks of light as their powers clash. In the chaos, Kyuthu's sadistic laughter echoes, her delight growing with each new assault. She taunts them mercilessly, mocking their fear and hesitation. Meal, trembling with exhaustion, tells her brother that they need to end this quickly. The brother nods, summoning a wave of dark, demonic energy that merges with his sister's angelic light, creating a swirling force that surges toward Kyuthu. Caught off guard by the intensity of their combined attack, Kyuthu stumbles back. With inhuman speed, she sliced the creature apart in a single stroke, her movements so swift the siblings barely registered what had happened. She flicked the blood off her blade, smirking. "Cute trick, but don't get cocky," she sneered. "You've got a long way to go before you can even think about beating me." The sister's face darkened with anger. She pointed a trembling finger at Kyuthu, her voice filled with venom. "You're a sinner. You're going straight to hell for this, and there's no doubt about it." Kyuthu just shrugged. "Maybe," she said nonchalantly, brushing off the accusation like a speck of dirt. "But at least I'm getting the chance to showcase my skills. You know how hard it is for a hero like me to let loose? In public, I'd get locked up for something like this. But thanks to you two and your little freak show of a town, I've got the perfect playground to go all out." Her grin widened as she raised her hands, summoning her ultimate creation, something she'd been dying to unleash. With a guttural roar, she conjured a massive cutter, so immense that the strain left her bleeding from her eye sockets and nose. The siblings watched in horror, unable to process the magnitude of her summon. For Kyuthu, this moment was pure bliss. The sheer scale of the cutter was unlike anything she'd summoned before, the culmination of her twisted imagination fueled by countless lives taken. She stared at the glowing blade in awe, her laughter spiraling into unhinged hysteria. "Magnificent," she whispered, blood trickling down her face. "Absolutely magnificent." But her moment of triumph didn't last. Just as she turned to savor the chaos, a dark shadow loomed behind her. Without warning, a demonic entity appeared, consuming her in a single grotesque motion. Her laughter was abruptly silenced, leaving only her outstretched hand as a grim reminder of her demise. The siblings froze, staring at the horrifying scene. The one responsible for Kyuthu's abrupt end was none other than the sister, her magic thrumming with a dark, unfamiliar energy. She had undergone a similar transformation to Kyuthu but wielded it with terrifying precision, ending the sadistic hero's rampage in a single stroke. The boy's jaw dropped as he stared at his sister, who was now trembling under the weight of her actions. Tears welled up in her eyes as she whispered, "I killed her." The brother placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice gentle but firm. "She wasn't human anymore. She was a demon. You did what you had to." A year passed since that fateful encounter, and the siblings had grown even more powerful, their utopia expanding into a grander yet darker version of their original vision. Despite their attempts to create their perfect world, the Hero Association flagged them as new threats. They were no longer the idealistic children they once were. They were now classified as level B2 villains, marked for containment in Ruculus prison. The news reached Mago, who broke into a cold sweat the moment he saw their faces on the villain registry. Confused and heartbroken, he demanded answers. "How did it come to this?" he asked, his voice shaking. Chairman Uteridai confirmed the worst. "It's true," he said grimly. "They're your former apprentices." Desperate to reconnect, Mago insisted on handling the situation personally, but the chairman immediately shut him down. "You're not getting involved in this case," he barked, his temper flaring. Mago's frustration boiled over. "What the hell are you talking about? They're my kids. I need to fix this." The chairman slammed his fist into the table, cracking it down the middle. "You had one job, Mago. One. You were supposed to kill the Swede on the spot and come back. But instead, you handed him over to the government alive." Alive! The tension reached a boiling point, and Mago squared up to the chairman, his voice cold. "You're a lunatic. All you care about is your authority. If you think I'm just going to stand by dash..." "Enough!" A calm but commanding voice cut through the argument. Captain Reyesa entered the room, her cape flowing behind her. "I'll take care of this," she announced. Mago glared at her but hesitated. Her voice carried a rare confidence, and as she approached, she placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Trust me, I won't let you down." Back in the siblings' utopia, the duo spotted an outsider entering their domain. Their frustration grew when they realized it was Reyesa, one of the greatest heroes. When she finally arrived, she addressed them with a solemn tone. "I'm here to bring you back." The siblings wasted no time summoning their monsters, making it clear she wasn't welcome. But Reyesa, with one devastating attack, burned their entire horde to ashes. She marched forward, her presence overwhelming. "You're kind-hearted children," she said softly, her voice tinged with sadness. "But your actions have hurt so many. If someone had guided you properly, none of this would have happened." Her words pierced their hearts. She extended her hand, her tone gentle but firm. "Release your control. Come back with me. Mago's waiting for you." The siblings hesitated, but her warmth reminded them of their mother. Slowly, they reached for her hand, tears streaming down their faces. And when they saw Mago waiting for them just beyond the city, they ran to him, crying out apologies for their mistakes. Reunited, Mago reassured them. "It's not too late," he said, his voice steady. "You can still be the good children you always wanted to be." For the first time in years, the siblings felt hope. As the old man watched the siblings resting, Reyesa approached quietly, her presence as calm and steady as ever. "Have you finished talking to them?" she asked, her tone carrying a note of sympathy. Mago turned to her, his expression serious. "Can you entrust them to me?" he asked directly. Reyesa's brows furrowed. "You know it's not that simple. They may not have killed anyone in the village, but they held thousands of people hostage. And let's not forget they killed a hero. It'll be hard for them to avoid the death penalty in court. They're just kids, Reyesa," Mago said, his voice firm but tinged with desperation. "They strayed from the right path, yes, but they've realized their mistakes now. If you leave them with me, I'll make sure they understand what they've done and help them change." Reyesa's expression softened slightly, but she shook her head. "Mago, it's not up to me. The law is the law." He wasn't ready to back down. "The law isn't always right," he countered. "They're too young to be executed. Surely you don't agree with the changes the association leader made to allow underage executions." Her voice grew somber. "I don't," she admitted. "I hate that law, but I can't go against it. A hero's job isn't to rehabilitate criminals, it's to uphold justice. Even if I understand your perspective, I'm bound by the rules." Mago took a deep breath, his mind racing. "If you're so determined to reshape the world," he said, locking eyes with her, "start here. Help me give these children a chance to grow into the people they were meant to be." Reyesa hesitated, her resolve flickering for a moment. "There's too much wrong with this world," she admitted softly. "That's why I need your help. If you work with me, Maybe we can make things right together. How does that relate to the siblings? Mago asked, his voice laced with suspicion. Her gaze sharpened, her determination visible. I need you to help me fix this broken system. If you agree, I'll make sure these kids aren't sentenced to death, at least not until they reach adulthood. Mago didn't miss the weight of her words but nodded. Let me use my ability to protect them. If they're going to survive, they'll need it. Reisa considered him for a long moment, then gave a small nod. Fine, do it. Without hesitation, Mago cast a barrier around the siblings, a shimmering green dome, the same unbreakable shield that had once baffled even the strongest of heroes. As the light settled around them, Reisa watched in silence, her emotions carefully guarded. Meanwhile, another observer, Gang Ho, stood nearby, his face unreadable as he processed everything he had just witnessed. Memories stirred in his mind, memories of introducing his own brother to Reisa, a time when they had all been idealistic, eager to change the world. Snapping back to the present, Gang Ho rose to his feet, his towering frame commanding attention. Before he could speak, the young boy, one of the siblings, spoke up, his voice trembling but defiant. We only judged people based on the rules we made. Isn't that what the law is? Just rules made by people in power. His question cut through the tension, leaving everyone silent for a beat. Then Reisa stepped forward, her voice measured. Laws are complicated, she began, choosing her words carefully. But you have to understand, what you did wasn't dash. Before she could finish, Gang Ho suddenly trapped her inside a crimson bubble, energy threads swirling from his hand. Reisa froze, stunned, as he turned his attention to the terrified siblings. The siblings backed away, tears streaming down their faces as they begged for mercy. Please don't hurt us, the boy cried, his voice breaking. We're sorry. We know what we did was wrong. Gang Ho's imposing figure loomed over them, his fist clenched and trembling with raw power. The prison walls shook as he raised his fist, ready to deliver judgment. The siblings screamed, bracing for the end. But instead of striking them, Gang Ho drove his fist into the ground, the force creating a massive crater beneath them. Dust and debris filled the air as his frustration erupted in silence. The siblings trembled, staring up at him in disbelief. Even the warden, watching from the sidelines, looked horrified by the near miss. Gang Ho's expression was a storm of conflicting emotions: anger, regret, confusion. As he wrestled with his thoughts, the moment was shattered by an unexpected turn. Without warning, the siblings' bodies were ripped apart, their remnants scattering like torn paper. Everyone froze. The perpetrator stepped into view, a woman with an unsettlingly cheerful demeanor. She radiated an air of delusion as she admired her handiwork. Finally, she exclaimed, clapping her hands together. Now, Gang Ho, we can be together. The siblings' remains drifted around her as she turned to face the stunned hero. Ah, don't look at me like that, she teased. You're even more handsome in person. This was meant to be, my dear husband. Gang Ho's jaw tightened, his shock quickly giving way to disgust. Who the hell are you? He demanded, his voice sharp. Oh, silly me, she giggled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Sinka, and I'll be the Eve of a new mankind. Gang Ho's patience snapped. He swung a powerful punch at her face, but before it could connect, a man stepped in front of her, taking the full force of the blow. To everyone's surprise, the man survived, barely flinching. He straightened himself and adjusted his collar, turning to Gang Ho with a smirk. You should learn some manners, the lackey said. Sinka scowled at her subordinate. Canis, stop being rude to my future husband, she snapped. He'll be your master soon enough. Canis quickly bowed, muttering an apology. Sinka beamed before turning her attention back to Gang Ho. Now, where were we? Oh, right. I was about to explain how I'll reshape humanity. It's all very exciting. Gang Ho, exhausted beyond belief, let out a long sigh. You've got to be kidding me, he muttered. First the siblings, now this crazy lady. What the hell is going on? Hearing this, Sinka frowned. Crazy? Me? Oh no, I'm the sanest person here, she declared proudly. Her lackeys nodded enthusiastically, like bobbleheads on a dashboard. Gang Ho simply closed his eyes, pinching the bridge of his nose. "I'm too old for this," he muttered under his breath, already dreading what came next. Sinka's tone grew more dramatic as she stepped closer, her eyes gleaming with unsettling conviction. "Mankind is in a dire situation," she declared, her voice laced with urgency. "They're degenerating, Gang Ho. Every day, they're spiraling closer to extinction. If this continues, humanity will disappear sooner than you think." Gang Ho rubbed his temples, visibly exhausted by the nonsense pouring out of her mouth. "What are you even talking about?" he muttered, utterly bewildered. She smiled sweetly, ignoring his disbelief. "You're part of the Hero Association, right? Specifically, equality. Let me guess you think villains are the real threat to humanity. Or maybe you think it's the fault of past heroes with too much power." She wagged a finger at him, her tone condescending. "But you're wrong. Entirely wrong." Gang Ho face-bombed again, this time harder. He let out a groan of pure exhaustion. "You've got to be kidding me." Sinka wasn't kidding. She continued, undeterred. "The true problem isn't villains or rogue heroes. It's the ordinary people with no powers. They're the real disease eating away at mankind. They've multiplied like rats, diluting the gene pool with their weakness, and now they outnumber the strong. Do you have any idea how unnatural this is?" Gang Ho's hand dragged down his face, his patience wearing thinner by the second. "I don't have time for this crap," he muttered under his breath, but Sinka was already moving on. "Think about it," she pressed. "People with superior genes have made countless sacrifices to protect the weak. But what's the result? The inferior ones keep breeding while the strong heroes like Reisa and the second-generation equality team are the ones who die early, even though they should have thrived according to nature's law." She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "It's only natural, you know. Those who aren't chosen by evolution should go extinct. But heroes interfered, trying to stop what's supposed to happen. And look where that got us." Gang Ho was done, completely done. His eyes screamed, "Why is this my life?" He looked away, muttering something under his breath that sounded suspiciously like, "I need a drink. Thanks for watching, guys. Comment Flamingo and subscribe for the next part." Sinka either didn't notice or didn't care. "But you're free now," she exclaimed, her smile widening. "You're no longer part of the Hero Association, so you don't have to follow their foolish ideology. That's why I've fallen for you, Gang Ho. I can tell you understand the value of eliminating the weak." Gang Ho froze, slowly turning his head back toward her. "Excuse me? Ruculus Prison is full of superior humans, people unfairly punished for purging the weak. Together, we'll create a new society, an alpha world, where only those with strong abilities thrive. And don't worry, if any of the strong heroes change their minds and decide to join us, I'll welcome them with open arms. I'm generous like that." Gang Ho stared at her, his jaw clenched so tightly it was a wonder his teeth didn't crack. "You're insane," he finally said, his voice flat with disbelief. Sinka ignored his comment and carried on, her eyes gleaming with a manic light. "You, Gang Ho, are the atom of my new world, and I, Sinka, will be Eve." She clasped her hands together dreamily. "I've already started imagining our offspring leading the next step in mankind's evolution." Gang Ho closed his eyes and let out a long, slow sigh. "I really don't have time for this." "Oh, I almost forgot," Sinka said, suddenly perking up. "I briefly considered making Huang my atom, but he's underage and hasn't even hit puberty yet, so I had to adjust my plans." Gang Ho's eyes snapped open, his expression sharp. "Huang?" Sinka grinned at his reaction. "Yes, your dear little brother. He would have been perfect, but his abilities haven't fully awakened yet. And, well, time is of the essence, so I came up with an alternative plan." Gang Ho's blood ran cold as she continued. "You see, I used my space manipulation abilities to launch a customized EMP from inside the prison," she said with pride. "It took some effort to bypass the security, but I eventually found the internal floor plan. Once I was in, I breached the system with the EMP strike and, well, you know the rest." His fists clenched tightly. "So you are the one who caused the attack?" "Oh, relax," she said, waving her hand dismissively. I never intended for your brother to die. It was just a little miscalculation. Her expression shifted again, a sickeningly sweet smile spreading across her face. But look on the bright side, now you can build a new family with me. Isn't that exciting? Gang Ho took a slow step forward, his gaze locking onto hers with an intensity that made even Canis flinch. You're going to regret everything, he said, his voice cold as death itself. And I promise to make your death as painless as possible. Sinka's smug confidence faltered for the first time. Why are you so angry? She asked, her voice laced with genuine confusion. Canis, standing to the side, muttered under his breath, I've got a bad feeling about this. The warden's eyes burned, a mix of rage and sorrow bleeding through them. Dark lightning danced around his fists, tearing apart the space Sinka had manipulated. The sheer force of his power cracked the ground beneath him, distorting the air between them. Sinka, ever the delusional optimist, forced a smile and shifted back into her lovey-dovey persona. You're so passionate, she cooed. It's one of the many things I love about you. Before Gang Ho could react, only for Sinka to grin and casually open a portal. In a flash, he was thrown out of the prison and into the sky. Catch you later, lover boy, she called, waving cheerfully as the portal snapped shut. Why don't you chill out and enjoy the view? But her smugness didn't last. A deafening crack of lightning split the sky as Ganyu crashed back down like a meteor, obliterating the prison floor in an explosion of force. He drilled straight through the layers of stone, reaching her and her crew in the blink of an eye. Smoke and debris swirled around him as he emerged from the crater, his glowing, crackling form radiating unbridled power. Sinka froze for a second, visibly stunned, while her crew backed away, unsure of what to do. But her grin returned as she met his burning gaze. Dazzling, she said softly, her tone almost admiring. Before she could say more, Ganyu vanished, his body cloaked in dark, ominous lightning. In an instant, he reappeared before her, his hand mere inches from her throat. Sinka barely dodged, teleporting across the room with another portal. Well, aren't we eager? She teased, her voice ringing out through the portals she kept opening. Catch me if you can, Warden. Ganyu's eyes narrowed, the dark energy around him intensifying. He muttered a single word under his breath. One. With that command, his hand morphed into a massive claw-like appendage, its jagged edges glowing with raw, destructive power. Sinka's confident smirk faltered as she stared at the monstrous transformation. What the dash, she started. But Ganyu didn't wait. He lunged at her with blinding speed, his claws slicing through the air with deadly precision. Sinka barely managed to teleport out of harm's way, reappearing behind him. But this time, his claw was already waiting for her, slashing toward her face. She let out a startled yelp, disappearing into another portal. The game of cat and mouse continued, with Ganyu relentlessly pursuing her through every portal she opened. Sinka's playful banter grew quieter with each near miss, her panic rising as his attacks became faster, sharper, and more precise. Finally, he closed the gap. His claw hovered just inches from her terrified face, and a single tear welled up in her eye as she whispered, "Wait, dash," before he could strike. A figure shot out of nowhere, a cat-like woman whose flexible, paper-thin body wrapped tightly around the warden. She purred sweetly into his ear. "Meow, don't be so rough, handsome." But Ganyu wasn't impressed. "I hate cats," he muttered darkly. With a surge of power, he grabbed her by the head and slammed her into the ground with such force that shockwaves rippled through the area. He lifted her limp body and slammed her down again, tossing her around like a rag doll while Sinka and her crew watched in stunned silence. When he finally stopped, all that was left of the cat woman was a splatter of blood on the ground. Or so it seemed. A moment later, the cat woman's body reformed, and she groaned, rubbing her head. "That was so unnecessary," she grumbled. "Sinka, this guy's gonna kill us both if you keep playing with him." She turned to Ganyu, glaring. "You just cost me one of my lives, jerk." Ganyu didn't flinch, his eyes already locked back on Sinka. "You've got 9, right? Let's see how many you've got left." The cat woman visibly panicked, backing away while muttering about how much she hated her job. Meanwhile, Sinka's cheery demeanor cracked further, frustration creeping into her voice. "This is getting ridiculous," she spat. "You're pushing me to desperate measures, Warden." Finally, Ganyu's energy surged again, and the area darkened as ominous orbs materialized around him, crackling with raw power. Sinka's playful smirk vanished entirely, replaced by a somber expression. "Enough games," she said coldly. With a wave of her hand, countless portals opened around the room, and figures began stepping through. The warden froze for a moment, his eyes narrowing as he took in the scene. "Meet the new rulers of mankind," Sinka said, gesturing dramatically. "Say hello to your replacements." First came the B3 prisoners. The brooding Swede, a summoner type who sneered at the mention of Mago's name. Ho, the Catwoman who was still nursing her wounds. The hulking old man Frichua, a physical powerhouse. Natura, a boy with special abilities. The weeping girl Pekinu, another special type, and Vidi, a pipe-smoking summoner with a mysterious air. Then came the clown-like Morris, the fierce Xingxi, and the monstrous Tiburon. Next were the B4 prisoners. Tatsujin, a deadly combination of physical and special abilities. Stiffness, a cocky physical type. Terrapir, another arrogant brawler, and Maildi, a bizarre summoner. Then came the alien-like Hyrule, an unsettling figure with special powers. Finally, the B5 criminals stepped through. Ahura, a special type radiating raw energy, and Huang Xuanwen, a name that needed no introduction. Ganyu didn't respond. Instead, the energy around him condensed, dark lightning crackling as he activated his zero mode. His body no longer looked human, shrouded in raw power and a monstrous form that radiated sheer destruction. Sinka's smirk faltered. "Oh, you've got to be kidding me," she muttered. Without a word, Ganyu charged straight at her, his claws aimed for the flesh ball she held. Blue and red energy clashed violently, shaking the entire prison to its foundation. The roar of their battle echoed through the halls, a sound so deafening and primal that even the most hardened criminals flinched in terror. The onlookers stood frozen, watching as the warden, no longer human, tore into the battlefield with relentless fury. Chaos had truly descended, and there was no turning back. Some of the prisoners couldn't help but enjoy the chaos, smirking as they watched the clash unfold. A few even speculated whether the shockwaves from the battle had already taken out weaker inmates elsewhere in the prison. Meanwhile, back in the command room, the staff was in full-blown panic. The prison trembled violently, cracks forming along its seemingly indestructible walls. Soldiers stumbled, alarms blared, and the director, her face pale with fear, was on the verge of tears. She had never imagined things could escalate to this point. Inside the prison, terror gripped the inmates who witnessed Seo Gang-ho in zero mode. The B3 and B4 prisoners had all been captured by the Equality Heroes, but none had ever seen the warden unleashed like this. Even the alien-like Hyrule, who rarely showed emotion, trembled at the sight of him. At that moment, Hyrule finally understood why Rao-sun, the Equality Captain, never allowed Gang-ho to face villains in his full power. "It's him," someone whispered, their voice trembling with awe. The reincarnation of death. As Zero Mode's monstrous energy swirled around Gang-ho, the reactions varied. Some prisoners were overcome with envy, others with despair. But among them, Huang stood apart. Unlike the rest, he was grinning from ear to ear, his eyes alight with joy. This is incredible," Huang exclaimed, his voice filled with genuine admiration. "Warden, why didn't you show me this during our fight before?" Gang-ho didn't respond. He was done talking. In a blur of motion, he charged at Huang, his clawed hand crackling with dark energy. Huang barely managed to throw up a barrier, but the sheer force of the strike shattered it, leaving him stumbling back, blood dripping from his mouth. Undeterred, Huang retaliated by unleashing a barrage of glowing energy spheres, each one detonating with explosive force. The rapid blasts staggered Gang-ho momentarily, but he shook them off as if they were nothing. Lightning surged around him as he charged forward again, his speed increasing to godly levels. Huang smirked and condensed the space in front of him, creating an invisible barrier that detonated explosively as Gang-ho forced his way through it. The shockwave slowed the warden down, but only for a moment. Watching this from the sidelines, "This kid," she muttered, eyeing Huang warily. "He's terrifying, and he's only a child. What kind of monster will he become when he's grown?" Huang's laughter cut through the chaos. "Come on, warden. Stop holding back," he shouted, his voice filled with glee. "I know you're not using your full strength. What's the matter? Afraid your precious officers will become collateral damage?" Gang Ho's eyes narrowed, his patience fraying. Huang was getting under his skin. "Softy," Huang teased, his grin widening. "But don't worry, I'll make us a playground where you don't have to hold back anymore." Before Gang Ho could respond, the entire prison began to warp and crack. Dust and debris rained down as the roof started to collapse under an enormous pressure. A powerful surge of mana enveloped the fortress, plunging everything into chaos. In the command room, soldiers struggled to keep their balance as the building quaked violently. The director screamed, her voice barely audible over the deafening sound of shattering walls. "What the hell is happening now?" she shouted, clutching onto a console for support. Back in the prison, the scene grew even more chaotic. Massive chunks of stone crashed to the ground, forcing inmates to scramble for cover. The oppressive mana in the air suffocated them, leaving even the strongest prisoners gasping for breath. Suddenly, Gang Ho's ominous strings materialized, wrapping around the prison staff. The director could only watch in horror as her soldiers were encased in glowing red orbs, then flung skyward. The strings carried them out of the collapsing fortress, sparing them from being crushed under the falling rubble. Standing amidst the destruction, looked around with gleeful amusement. "I have to admit," she said, laughing, "this place is sturdy. Whoever built this prison deserves a medal." Gang Ho, his rage unrelenting, seized the moment to charge at her. His clawed hand surged with power as he aimed a devastating strike at her chest. But just before impact, a portal suddenly materializes, swallowing him whole. The portal belongs to Crybaby, the rejected criminal, who is now whining loudly about people interfering while she uses her abilities. Turning to her subordinates, she casually suggests that they leave since there's too much dust in the air. Meanwhile, Tatsu kneels down, placing her palm against the ground. She appears deep in thought, and the sudden movement catches Sinka's attention. Intrigued, Sinka watches as the ponytailed girl draws her katana, asking her curiously, "What do you plan to do with that?" Tatsu, however, doesn't bother to answer. Without hesitation, she swings her blade, the strike tearing through the walls and carving an escape route. Dust and debris scatter as the newly created opening reveals the outside. Sinka looks impressed but can't help voicing her disapproval. "Why waste your strength like that?" she asks. "We could have used my portals instead." She waves her subordinates over, ordering them to gather so they can leave. Tatsu, still silent, sheathes her sword. The scene shifts to a bustling city street, where Gang Ho suddenly materializes mid-punch, his posture frozen. People stop and stare in confusion at the strange sight. The sneaky crybaby has managed to throw him off course. Before anyone can figure out what's happening, another portal opens, and Gang Ho vanishes once again. His disoriented audience is left scratching their heads, murmuring about what they just witnessed. Now, in the middle of nowhere, the Red Devil enraged and ready for battle stands with fury etched across his face. Above him hovers a massive, condensed ball of rocks, pulsating with energy. Atop this floating mass stands Huang, laughing maniacally. Boom! Huang shouts gleefully, using his power to detonate the rocky sphere. The explosion sends massive boulders, charged with blue mana, hurtling in every direction like meteorites. Gang Ho stands firm beneath the chaotic onslaught, shielding himself as the debris rains down. When the dust settles, the area is unrecognizable. The once solid ground is now riddled with enormous craters from the impact of the mana-infused rocks. Huang gracefully descends from his perch, his movements theatrical. He walks toward Gang Ho, who has been driven to his knees by the force of the blast. One of Gang Ho's glowing eyes flickers, his energy faltering slightly, signaling that his zero mode is beginning to weaken. Still, the warden pushes himself to his feet, his determination unwavering. He prepares for yet another showdown with the maniac in the massive crater left behind by the explosion. Watching from higher ground, the other criminals remain silent, their gazes fixed on the battle below. "Do not interfere," Sinka commands, her voice firm. "This is their fight." None of the criminals dare to argue. They understand all too well that stepping in would mean certain annihilation, and they have no desire to defy the orders of their boss lady. The reason these B3 and B4 criminals are obedient, despite their unruly nature, lies in Sinka's promises. She tapped into their desires, the deep, often selfish feelings that all humans harbor, and used them to bind the criminals to her alpha world. But not everyone was easy to convince. A Swede, the green-haired rebel, had challenged her, asking what would happen if he refused her offer. Sinka had coldly warned him that refusal would mean his death. Her serious tone left no room for doubt, and it ultimately convinced him to comply. Huang, on the other hand, had a very different reaction. When Sinka pitched her vision of a new mankind, he found the idea utterly ridiculous. He laughed so hard that tears streamed down his face, thoroughly amused by her delusional desire to marry Gang Ho and, eventually, himself. Instead of being offended, Sinka seemed genuinely pleased by his reaction. But Huang raised a problem. Fighting Gang Ho was far more interesting to him than her grand vision of an alpha world or her bizarre marriage proposals. The thrill of clashing with his rival was far more compelling than any scheme Sinka could offer. Sinka, of course, wasn't going to give up so easily. She warned Huang that if he focused solely on short-term pleasures, he'd become nothing more than a dopamine addict. He needed to think long-term. "What will you do if you manage to kill Gang Ho?" she asked, attempting to manipulate him. "After that, life will lose its meaning, won't it?" But Huang shrugged off her warning. To him, dying in the heat of a thrilling battle was an acceptable outcome. Sinka tried a different approach. "If Gang Ho and I have a child," she said, "and then later you and I have one too, they'll grow up to be strong enough to keep you entertained. And once you're older, you'll become even stronger than you are now. Then you can have even more fun fighting Gang Ho than you're having now." Her words seemed to strike a chord. Huang's expression shifted, his eyes glowing with a strange light. Sinka's heart swelled with satisfaction, believing she'd finally won him over. "I'll give it a try," Huang said, his grin returning. "Sounds like it could be fun." Sinka beamed with pride, praising him for making the right decision. Still, Huang had a lingering doubt. "I don't love you," he said bluntly. "So how are we supposed to get married?" Sinka, undeterred, walked closer to him. "That's fine," she said confidently. "You'll love me eventually." She leaned in, pushing her chest forward suggestively. Enough of the backstory. In the present, Gang Ho lands a devastating punch on Huang, his fist driving into the kid's stomach with enough force to send him flying into the crater wall. Blood erupts from Huang's mouth as he crumples to the ground. The criminals watching from above flinch at the sheer impact, their eyes widening as the critical blow shakes the entire battlefield. Gang Ho doesn't stop there. Standing over the fallen maniac, he raises his fist for another strike, his energy surging. The fight isn't over yet. Huang wipes the blood from his mouth, laughing as though he's having the time of his life. Realizing one hand won't be enough anymore, he decides he might have to drop the ball of condensed flesh he's been toying with. Mockingly, he turns to the warden. "Say something, warden. What's the matter? Cat got your tongue." Gang Ho remains completely silent, no words of defiance or heroism leaving his lips. Huang begins to grow uneasy at the lack of response. "What's this? Are you going to stay silent the whole time? Or is it that you can't even talk in this super form of yours?" The kid's twisted grin widens as he crosses a line he can never return from. With his trademark maniacal expression, he sneers, "You know, this little ball of flesh, it's your brother's remains." The words hit like a sledgehammer. Gang Ho's mind snaps, and rage erupts inside him. His anger surges uncontrollably, the one thing he never wanted to hear now spoken out loud. With a guttural scream, he leaps toward Huang, his only goal to snatch the flesh ball out of the criminal's hands. Huang, however, is far more preoccupied with confirming his theory. "Oh, so you can talk in this form," he mutters gleefully to himself, completely ignoring the raging warden charging at him. Gang Ho rushes toward the laughing maniac, whose grin only grows wider as he bounces the flesh ball casually in his hands. Huang begins to power up, energy crackling beneath his feet as chunks of rock rise into the air. The floating stones mold themselves into jagged, spear-like shapes, each one brimming with destructive energy. The deadly rain of rocky spears surges toward Gang Ho, but the warden meets it head-on. Smashing his power-fueled fist into the oncoming attack, he repels the spears with his energy strings, shattering and deflecting them in all directions. The air is thick with explosions as the warden expertly dodges and counters, his focus never leaving Huang. Amidst the chaos, Gang Ho spots the condensed flesh ball flying toward him. He braces himself to attack it, but just as his fist draws back, he hesitates. Something inside him freezes. If what Huang said is true, if this really is his brother's remains, he can't bring himself to strike it. Huang, ever the opportunist, takes full advantage of Gang Ho's hesitation. With a wicked grin, he launches the ball forward at blinding speed. The makeshift cannonball slams directly into Gang Ho's abdomen, the force so immense it sends him hurtling backward. He crashes into the ground, skidding several feet before coming to a halt. Laughing hysterically, Huang retrieves the flesh ball with a snap of his energy strings and starts bouncing it in his hand again like a child playing with a toy. Slowly, he approaches the fallen warden. "You can't even attack it, can you?" Huang taunts, shaking his head in mock pity. "What a shame, warden. What a shame." As Gang Ho struggles to rise, the B5 criminal tilts his head thoughtfully, a malicious gleam in his eyes. "Oh, I just had a great idea," he says with mock enthusiasm. "What if I just eat it?" "What then, warden? Would you be able to attack me?" The warden's expression darkens as his rage reignites, but Huang continues his cruel teasing. "I mean, it's a little too big to eat all at once, but no worries. I'll just compress it a bit to make it easier to swallow." Gang Ho doesn't wait for the kid to act on his vile words. With a thunderous flash, he leaps from the ground and slams his foot into Huang's chest, sending the kid crashing into the earth. The impact is so powerful that it creates a mini crater within the larger one, sending debris flying in every direction. Huang cries out in pain, blood spurting from his mouth as he lies crumpled in the crater. Gang Ho towers over him, one foot pressing firmly against his chest, pinning him in place. His eyes burn with fury as he raises his fist, energy swirling and condensing around it. The punch lands squarely on Huang's face, unleashing a surge of energy that ripples outward in visible waves. But Gang Ho doesn't stop there. Like a relentless storm, he rains down blow after blow, his fists smashing into Huang with unrelenting force. The ground trembles with each strike as the warden's rage fuels his relentless assault. Watching from the sidelines, the other criminals including Hyro, the alien, Tatsu, the ponytailed girl, and Stiffness stand in stunned silence. They can't take their eyes off the brutal spectacle before them. As Gang Ho continues his onslaught, the strain on his body becomes evident. His zero mode begins to waver, the mask peeling off from one of his glowing eyes. Sensing an opening, Huang raises his arm, now glowing with immense blue mana. To Gang Ho's shock, the kid begins to laugh again. Even after enduring such a beating, Huang's energy surges once more, his body glowing brighter with each passing moment. "You're still enjoying this?" Gang Ho mutters in disbelief as Huang's laughter echoes through the crater. The tension reaches its breaking point as Huang releases a massive burst of energy that shoots straight into the sky. The resulting blast is so powerful that even the criminals on the higher ground stare in stunned silence, watching as the energy pierces the horizon. None of them can believe the sheer scale of the display. Not one of them can imagine taking on either Gang Ho or Huang in a one-on-one battle. Even Sinka, who rarely shows concern, is left speechless. Then her expression shifts. She clasps her hands together, her eyes wide with admiration. "It's beautiful," she whispers, awestruck by the energy swirling around the two fighters. But her admiration isn't for the fight itself, it's for the raw power. In her delusional mind, all she can think about is how this power could help her create a new mankind. Turning to her subordinates, she sighs dramatically. "It's such a sad sight, really. If only they'd stop fighting and work together. It'd be better for everyone, especially me." Her subordinates, however, don't share her optimism. They shake their heads, one of them muttering, "That's never going to happen." Meanwhile, Hyun, one of the B3 criminals, peers into the crater and announces, "It's almost over. They're both at their limits. Inside the crater, Gang Ho has returned to his normal form, his body trembling from the damage he's taken. Huang, no longer laughing, lies slumped at the edge of the battlefield, his energy nearly spent. Gang Ho forces himself to his feet, his bloodied body barely holding together. His eyes burn with unwavering determination. Even as his power fades, his hatred for Huang keeps him standing. Suddenly, Huang's eyes widen in fear. For the first time, he looks truly terrified. Red energy strings sweep across the ground like a nest of writhing snakes, crackling with deadly intent. The criminals watching from above stare in awe as the strings weave together, forming a massive, dome-like structure. Its shadow looms over them like a giant monument, and they can only watch in stunned silence. "What is that?" Sinka whispers, her voice trembling as the enormous construct takes shape. Sinka yells in disbelief, "What is that thing?" As the massive dome-like structure fully forms, created by the intermingling red energy strings. The enormous construct blankets the entire crater, its sheer size making it impossible for anyone on the outside to see what's happening within. Inside the dome, Huang bursts into laughter, his voice echoing ominously. "How many special moves do you even have, Gang Ho?" he jeers. "With this many incredible tricks up your sleeve, how could anyone hope to defeat you?" He calls out Gang Ho's name, his grin growing wider. "Tell me, how does it feel?" he asks, his tone mocking. "How does it feel to kill someone?" Gang Ho says nothing, his silence only fueling Huang's twisted glee. Huang presses further, the questions growing more pointed. "Do you feel disappointed after a kill?" he continues. "Because I do. For people like us, it's just a matter of a single touch. It's over so quickly that it doesn't even feel satisfying. Does it?" His taunting strikes a nerve as he adds, "You became a prison warden because you wanted to punish criminals who kill, didn't you? But with power like yours, they perish in seconds. Isn't that right?" Gang Ho's rage boils over. "Shut your fucking mouth," he shouts, his voice a thunderous roar. But Huang, undeterred, leans into his role as a maniac, flashing a deranged smile. "And what are you going to do if I keep talking?" he retorts mockingly. He laughs even louder, eyes glinting with madness. "You must feel so refreshed now, huh? Finally letting out all those pent-up emotions after suppressing them for so long." The grin on his face widens as he continues. "You've been holding back for so long, haven't you? Trying to control that overwhelming power of yours because no one was ever a worthy opponent. Forced to spend your time babysitting those pieces of trash." He sneers, referring to the Equality Heroes hunters. "Am I wrong, Warden?" Gang Ho's fists tighten as his anger reaches a breaking point. "You don't know a damn thing about me," he snarls, his bloodied eyes glaring daggers at Huang. "Not an inch of my life or my feelings." Huang looks up at the towering dome surrounding them, his maniacal grin replaced by a thoughtful expression. "This skill of yours," he muses. "It must be really dangerous, probably your ultimate move. Huh? Too bad, because I'm reaching my limits too." He chuckles darkly before continuing. "It's a shame, really. I was having so much fun. If only I could grow stronger, maybe I could beat you someday." He pauses, recalling Sinka's earlier words. "You think, if I became an adult, like she said, I'd be able to take you down?" Gang Ho cuts him off with a cold, resolute voice. "That's never going to happen," he declares. "You're dying here. You'll never live long enough to become an adult." Outside the dome, Sinka is pacing nervously, her usual composure slipping. She yells at no one in particular. "What's happening in there?" Her frustration grows as she realizes she has no way of seeing inside the massive structure. She needs both of them alive for her plans, and this uncertainty is driving her mad. Finally, unable to wait any longer, she opens a portal to peek inside. The sight before her leaves her completely stunned. "Huang!" she screams in desperation. Inside, Huang, who had been laughing like a madman just moments ago, is now writhing in pain. The warden's crimson strings have pierced his body, immobilizing him completely. The kid who once seemed untouchable now looks like nothing more than a helpless child. The scene sends Sinka into a panic. Desperate to save him, she uses her portal to pull Huang out from the red string's grasp. She cradles his limp body in her lap, her hands trembling as she sees the blood staining his clothes. The strings are still embedded in his flesh, their malevolent energy refusing to let go. Someone, heal him, now! She screams at her subordinates. Stepping forward is Terrapir, a dark-skinned, white-haired B4 criminal with physical-type powers. Step aside, he says calmly, dropping to his knees beside Huang. I'll take care of this. Terrapir slashes his hand across Huang's torso, the cut glowing faintly as his healing ability kicks in. As he works, he notices something unusual. This kid, he mutters, astonished. Even in a state like this, he used his ability to protect his vital points. Impeccable combat instincts. That's a rare talent. The healing process is intense, and Terrapir's arm begins to wrap in Gangho's sinister red strings, still lingering from the attack. Once the process is complete, Terrapir steps back, informing Sinka, it's done. Sinka shakes Huang gently, her voice urgent. Huang, wake up. Can you hear me? Meanwhile, Terrapir examines the strings that have latched onto his arm. He stares at them with a mix of discomfort and fascination. Without hesitation, he raises a blade and slices off the affected part of his arm. Kitty Girl and the ponytailed girl watch in silence as Terrapir's severed arm begins to regenerate almost immediately. The new arm is monstrous, veins bulging across its surface, giving it a grotesque appearance. Terrapir flexes his new limb and turns to his fellow B4 criminals. What do we do about the warden? He asks bluntly. Before anyone can answer, Hyro, the alien-like B3 criminal, steps forward. What else is there to do? He growls. We kill him. Sinka interjects, raising her hand to stop them. Wait, she says firmly. I need to speak with him one last time. The criminals exchange uneasy glances but ultimately step back. Despite their reluctance, they know they must obey Sinka's orders if they want their desires fulfilled. Meanwhile, Gangho lies motionless on the ground, his energy completely drained. Blood seeps from his wounds, his body battered from the fight. But even in this state, he slowly forces himself to stand. His legs tremble, his breathing ragged, but he doesn't stop. Step by step, he walks toward the ball of condensed flesh, the remains of his brother. Finally, he reaches it and lifts it into his arms, cradling it gently. Time seems to freeze as Gangho stares at the ball in silence. His face is etched with grief, his bloodied eyes filled with pain. Tears of blood begin to stream down his face, dripping silently onto the ground. Sinka watches the scene unfold through her portal. With a bittersweet smile, she steps through, approaching the warden with open arms. Gangho, she says softly, placing a hand over her chest. It's not too late. Come with me. Let me help you. But Gangho barely acknowledges her presence. His sorrow twists into rage, and he activates his ability again, the red energy strings crackling back to life. Get the hell away from me, he growls, his voice filled with venom. Sinka flinches at the outburst, hurt flashing across her face. Why? She whispers. Why do you keep rejecting me? Before she can say anything else, a bolt of thunder crashes down, striking Gangho and forcing his ability to dissipate. A Swede, a B3 criminal, steps forward and activates his magic, declaring that the negotiations have broken down. With a cold resolve, he orders the others to kill Gangho before his energy has a chance to recover. If he regains even a fraction of his power, we won't be able to handle him, he warns. Turning to his team, he asks if anyone objects. Unsurprisingly, they all agree unanimously killing the warden is the only option. But even among these hardened criminals, there's a flicker of hesitation. Frichua, the old and somber member of the group, looks conflicted. It's a tragic end for someone so young, he murmurs, his voice tinged with regret. Pekanu, on the other hand, wrestles with her fear of killing. I hate taking lives, she admits softly, but leaving him alive might be worse. Natura, ever the nature lover, attempts to find solace in the grim decision. At least, he sighs, he'll return to nature. Meanwhile, Maldidi, the island girl, shows no patience for the debate. Can we just finish this already? I'm starving, she grumbles. Stiffness, the muscular brute, cracks his knuckles eagerly. I hope this guy can give me one last good fight, he says with a smirk. Vidi, more reflective than most, shakes his head sadly. What a terrible way for his story to end. he remarks. Kitty girl, teasing as always, giggles nervously. You've got to admit, he's scarier than a demon, she whispers to Hyun. Hyun, ever the cynic, mocks her. Are you scared, Kitty? He taunts, grinning. Suddenly, Hyro, the alien-like B3 criminal, steps forward with a booming shout. Move aside, he commands. His body grows to an enormous size as he prepares to deliver a massive blow. Hyro's enormous fist comes crashing down toward Gang Ho, who lies on the ground clutching the remains of his brother's condensed flesh to his chest, shielding it with every ounce of his remaining strength. The impact shakes the ground, and the other criminals immediately join in, launching their own relentless attacks. Throughout the assault, Gang Ho remains still, his thoughts consumed by memories of his brother. How long has it been since he lost him? He wonders, with his brother's remains pressed close to his heart. Gang Ho wraps his ability around the flesh ball, determined to protect it no matter what. When the barrage finally subsides, Hyro steps forward again, announcing, "It's time to end this." He raises his gigantic foot, preparing to crush Gang Ho beneath its weight. But before his attack lands, a sudden tornado of blue energy bursts forth, wrapping around Hyro's leg and stopping him in his tracks. The swirling energy halts the alien's movement, leaving the others in shock. Out of nowhere, Hwang, regaining his senses, steps into the fray. His presence instantly shifts the tension in the air. He approaches Sinka, his tone uncharacteristically serious. "Do you remember what you said?" he asks her. "That when I become an adult, I'll grow even stronger?" His voice carries a strange mix of determination and excitement. "For the first time in my life, I have a dream." Sinka, caught off guard, listens intently as Hwang continues. "That dream," he says, grinning wickedly, "is to defeat Seo Gang Ho." His laughter returns, maniacal and unrestrained, as Sinka stares at him in disbelief. Hwang turns to her with a request. "Don't kill him. I want to be the one to do it. I'll do it when I'm ready." A Swede immediately scoffs. "This is complete bullshit," he snaps. "We need to kill him now while he's weak." But Sinka pauses, considering Hwang's words carefully. She remembers how she used this same ambition to manipulate him before. After a moment, she makes her decision. "Stand down," she orders. The criminals exchange stunned glances. None of them are happy with the command, but Sinka reminds them of their promise to obey her. Begrudgingly, they all comply, though it's clear many of them resent the decision. As Sinka opens a portal for the group to leave, she turns to Hwang with a motherly smile. "Do you need my help?" she asks him. Hwang waves her off. "I'm fine. I can handle it," he replies confidently. Before stepping through the portal, Hwang casts a sidelong glance at Gang Ho, who remains unconscious on the ground. A sinister smile crosses his face as he thinks, "Next time we meet, I'll be the one who wins." As the portal closes, the aftermath of the EMP attack on Ruculus Prison becomes clear. A staggering number of criminals have escaped. 8B3 level, 5B4 level, and 3B5 level criminals, all incredibly dangerous individuals. Meanwhile, a figure stands on the edge of the massive crater left behind, wearing an outfit identical to Hwang's. The figure laughs quietly to himself as he surveys the chaos. "The world's about to get a whole lot noisier," he says, grinning. Just as Kingston predicted, Sinka's going to turn everything upside down. The next chapter opens on a bizarre sight. A pink starfish wearing a diaper, speaking in an incomprehensible gibberish language. The ponytailed girl listens to the creature, seemingly able to understand its nonsense. She responds with hesitation, "I'm not ready for it." But the conversation takes an unexpected turn, and her expression changes to one of shock. Somewhere else, a broadcast begins to air, announcing the dawn of a new world. The Alpha World, as it's called, will open its arms only to the strong. Sinka leads the broadcast with her two trusted minions by her side. She introduces herself confidently as the Eve of the Alpha World, and declares that the time has come for a new humanity to rise. Her muscular subordinate, Canis, and the cat-eyed Gotu take turns explaining the concept of the Alpha World. Canis begins by stating that the Alpha World is meant to save humanity, which he describes as being gravely ill. With Sinka as its Eve, the Alpha World will purge the weak and elevate the strong. Gotu takes over to outline the criteria for joining. First, individuals must have strong physical or special abilities. Second, they must not defend those deemed inferior. And third, regardless of gender, they must be healthy and capable of producing strong offspring. When asked about those who fail to meet these qualifications, Sinka answers directly, "Those with inferior genes are committing a crime by existing. They don't deserve to remain part of humanity." To emphasize her point, she coldly states, "The only just course of action is their execution." The broadcast shifts into a chant as Sinka declares, "All who aren't selected must die." She concludes by explaining that a selection committee will soon choose the neo-humans who will populate the Alpha world, and invitations will be sent to them. Anyone who rejects the invitation or defends the unworthy will be labeled an enemy of the Alpha world. Sinka ends the broadcast with a sly wink and a prayer for the neo-humans, reminding everyone that she, Eve, is their future. Niam, or whatever it's called. I guess I need to learn it too for secret conversations. The scene transitions to a large, tense meeting room where the World Security Council, WSC, gathers to address the catastrophic Roculus prison escape and Sinka's global broadcast, which has left the world's leadership scrambling to save face. The room is filled with influential figures, each grappling with the implications of the disaster. At the head of the meeting, Mr. Bezet, the world president, opens the emergency session. Sinka's profile is displayed on a massive screen, highlighting her attributes and her position as the leader of the so-called Alpha world. The council begins debating whether she orchestrated the EMP attack that crippled Roculus prison. Is she even on the villains list? One executive asks. Another representative, visibly irritated, replies, "The Hero Association claims she isn't. They've denied any involvement on her part." This lack of clarity frustrates the man with glasses, who pinches the bridge of his nose. "Another headache," he mutters, "especially after the deaths of the Equality heroes. Now this." Finally, a sharp, no-nonsense woman cuts through the noise. "Let's focus. What's our plan to handle this?" she asks, her tone brooking no argument. Amid the discussions, Mr. Einheit, the thick-headed leader of the Harmony Party, slams the table in frustration. "Before we go any further," he declares, "we need to address something important." The room groans collectively as Einheit steers the conversation onto a tangent. He criticizes Warden Joseon of Roculus prison, accusing her of taking unauthorized actions by executing criminals without first reporting to her superiors. "How can one person unilaterally make such decisions?" he asks, exasperated. "This chaos is the result of unchecked authority." His irrelevant rant earns him a sarcastic retort from another representative. "Are you really still on about this?" The man scoffs. "Can you focus on the actual crisis for once?" Mr. Uteridai, the former chairman of the Hero Association and current leader of the World Party, steps in to defend Warden Jo. "She made the best decision she could in a dire situation," he says firmly. "If I were in her position, I would have done the same." But Einheit isn't ready to back down. No matter how urgent the circumstances were, he insists, she should have reported it. Another representative, a man from Heveset, counters Einheit's argument. "In emergencies, not even a minute can be wasted," he explains. "She likely turned to Seo Gang who for help instead of waiting, and I completely understand why." Turning to Al Guido, the justice minister, Uteridai asks for his thoughts. Guido, ever the diplomat, carefully navigates the discussion. "It was an extraordinary situation," he concedes. "But that doesn't change the fact that it's wrong for one individual to have the power to execute criminals unchecked." The fire commissioner joins in, expressing concern about the long-term consequences. "The public is already suffering," he says grimly. "Things are going to get much worse after that broadcast." The police commissioner agrees, pointing out the deteriorating state of public safety. Then, the vice minister of national defense, a beast-like man with a cigar, asks the room a hard-hitting question. "Are we at war?" he growls. "Or is this still just a prison escape incident?" The former chairman of the Hero Association slams his fist on the table, visibly enraged. "I warned all of you," he shouts. "Those criminals needed to be executed. This disaster is the direct result of your hesitation." His anger spills over as he berates the group further. "If I were still in charge," he boasts, "none of this would have happened. Those criminals would have been eliminated long before execution even became necessary." Turning his fury on Reisa, the current chairman of the Hero Association, he accuses her of incompetence. Ever since you took over, the world has been spiraling into chaos, he roars. Mr. Boda, an ally of Reisa, shoots back. You haven't changed a bit, he snaps. You're still stuck in your outdated ways. Einheit, sensing an opportunity, joins in. Under your leadership, the heroes were unstable. He sneers at Uteradai. Look at the mess you left behind. Uteradai defends himself fiercely. It's better to keep them as heroes, he retorts, than to let them turn into villains. Einheit challenges him, asking pointedly, does it really matter if someone appears to be a hero on the outside while they're falling apart inside? The meeting devolves into chaos, with participants shouting over each other. Uteradai keeps dragging Reisa into the discussion, blaming her for the rise in villainy and the growing instability. The man with glasses, trying to remain level-headed, remarks, your definition of a hero is clearly very different from ours. This only enrages Uteradai further. You're so blinded by your idealized vision of the world, he barks. You refuse to see reality. Throughout the shouting match, Mr. Bezet, the world president, sits silently, observing the chaos. His gaze drifts to Ryasa's empty seat, wondering what she would have said if she had been present. The former chairman, sensing that Reisa would have outmatched him, finally falls silent. After the meeting, Einheit's assistant asks him how it went. Einheit's expression darkens. Terrible, he growls. Nothing's changed. We need to kill these criminals. End of story. He blames Reisa for weakening their position on the council, lamenting that many members, including the Harmony Party, the Fire Commissioner, and the Vice Minister of Defense, support her. We're outnumbered 4-2, he complains. Even the world president leans toward her side. However, Einheit believes there's now an opportunity. With the Hero Association's chairmanship vacant, he plans to appoint someone aligned with their views. If we can make it a 3-3 split, he tells his assistant, they'll finally have to take us seriously. Einheit reveals his plan to approach Seo Gang-hoo, a former hero of equality. Others are already making their moves. He hints, subtly referencing Lupus Allen, the bunny girl. His assistant asks, wasn't Seo Gang-hoo close to the former chairman? Einheit nods but remains confident. That was then, he replies. The situation is different now. We might just win him over. The two leave, heading to meet Gang-hoo. Meanwhile, our hero is undergoing surgery after his brutal fight with Huang. The healers work tirelessly to restore his strength, but his body looks utterly drained. The next chapter opens with a discussion on a timeless question. Why can't heroes kill villains? A muscular monk laughs heartily. I had the same thought when I joined equality, he says. You'll figure it out eventually. Gang-hoo, still sporting his ponytail, grows agitated. You expect me to kill people with my own hands? He snaps. If that's what being a hero means, I'll quit. How times have changed. A purple-haired woman chimes in, revealing that her sister is on death row. She committed crimes deserving death, she admits. But I still think she deserves a chance to atone. Blood is blood. An old man, Rego, poses the key question. Why must heroes kill villains? He offers possible answers. Maybe villains have no value alive, or maybe they've forsaken their humanity. But then he dives deeper. What gives someone value? And what does it mean to be human? Trapped in his thoughts, Rego asks for help, but no one answers. Instead, Ryosa steps in. The job of a hero isn't to kill villains, it's to save everyone, she says. She extends her hand to Mago, inviting him to join their mission. Yet, the original question lingers, unanswered, as Gang-hoo finds himself trapped in his moral dilemma. In a haunting flashback, his prison partner's voice echoes in his mind. An inspector's job is to rehabilitate criminals. Thanks for watching, guys. Comment Flamingo and subscribe for the next part.